Story 1.
The woman I married made me fall in love with a lie so perfectly constructed that the very thing I admired most about her was the trap itself. My wife spent our entire marriage funneling every dollar I earned into her niece's future, while our relationship slowly starved to death. And when I finally hired a PI to understand why she was so obsessed, what I found didn't just end my marriage, it made me question whether any part of it was ever real. I'm a 34-year-old guy from a small town trying to make it work in the city. My wife is Harper, 28, 2 jobs, 0 transparency. The kid at the center of everything is Simi, 6 years old, supposedly Harper's niece. Then there's Dolores, Harper's mother, and Noreen, her older sister, both of whom helped build the story I swallowed whole. I met Harper on a bus at 11:40 on a Tuesday night. The 9C route nearly empty, just me and the overhead fluorescent buzzing its dying insect sound. I'd been pulling overtime at the warehouse, double shifts back to back, and the city had that hollow feeling it gets when you're too tired to pretend you belong in it. I grew up in a town where you could name every dog on your street. Here, I couldn't name my neighbors. She got on 3 stops after me. Small frame, oversized jacket, headphones in, but no music playing, I could tell because the wire dangled into an empty pocket. She sat 2 rows ahead, and for 3 weeks straight, that was our entire relationship. 2 rows of cracked vinyl seats and silence. Then one Thursday, she wasn't there. Or Friday. Or the following Monday. When she reappeared on Tuesday, I said the dumbest thing. "You okay? I noticed you were gone." She turned around, and her face did something complicated, surprise folding into relief, folding into the smallest smile I'd seen on anyone in that city. "You noticed?" That was it. That was the whole beginning. We talked on the bus for 2 months before I asked for her number. She told me about growing up rural, about moving to the city for work, about how she picked up a second job waitressing on weekends because she was helping raise her sister Noreen's daughter. Noreen had gone through a brutal divorce, she said. The father vanished. Noreen was struggling, uneducated, barely functional some days, so Harper stepped in. Simi's only 4, she told me one night, her voice doing that soft thing it did when she talked about the kid. Someone has to show up for her. I remember my chest tightening. Not in a bad way. In the way that happens when you see something good and real in a world that keeps showing you the opposite. Here was a 26-year-old woman working 2 jobs, riding a late-night bus home, and her primary concern was a little girl who wasn't even hers. I compared her to every woman I'd met since moving to the city. The ones who wanted restaurants I couldn't afford. The ones who measured men by car models. Harper measured herself by whether Simi had new shoes for school. I proposed after 11 months. She cried. Simi threw rice at us at the courthouse and missed entirely hitting the clerk. We laughed until our stomachs hurt. The first year was tight but functional. We split rent, split groceries, operated like a team. Harper's 2 jobs plus my warehouse salary meant we weren't comfortable, but we were stable. Simi stayed with us most weekends, sometimes full weeks when Noreen was going through it, which seemed to be always. Then Harper said she wanted to enroll in a culinary certification program. 6 months, evening classes, real career potential. She asked if I could cover her share of expenses temporarily. Of course, I said. Because that's what you do. The culinary program ended. Her share never came back. Instead, it became Simi's school admission fees. Then Simi's uniforms. Then Simi's private tutoring because she was falling behind. Then a better tutor because the first one wasn't qualified. Each expense arrived with Harper's particular urgency, this breathless, almost panicked insistence that made saying no feel like kicking a puppy. I absorbed it. All of it. My overtime hours climbed. Our conversation shrank. We went from eating dinner together to eating in shifts. The bedroom became a place where 2 people slept facing opposite walls. One evening, I came home to Harper pacing the kitchen with a school brochure. Greenfield International Academy, she said, sliding it across the counter. I looked at the tuition. My mouth went dry. Harper, it's the best school in the district. Simi deserves a lot of things. So do we. When's the last time we went anywhere together? She looked at me like I'd spoken Mandarin. Then came the real problem. Greenfield had adopted a policy with the rising number of drug-addicted parents in the city. They didn't want children of such parents in the school because they considered them a bad influence on other kids. I know it's unfair for those kids, but that's how it is. More critically, the school admitted only children whose parents were at least high school graduates. Harper's sister Noreen had never finished school. Harper came up with a weird solution to this problem. She wanted to adopt Simi as our daughter. She said she would have adopted her as a single mother, but now that we were married, we had to adopt her as parents. Both of us. Legally. I'm not signing adoption papers for your niece Harper. Why not? You love her. Loving her and becoming her legal father are 2 different conversations. It's just paperwork. Then what about our kids? When do we start our family? Her face went still. Not sad. Not conflicted. Asterisk. Still. Asterisk. Like a door closing behind her eyes. Let's not have children then. 4 words. Delivered flat, without hesitation, like she'd rehearsed them. Like our future children were a negotiating chip she'd just tossed off the table to protect someone else's. I stood in that kitchen and felt something shift in my chest, a load-bearing wall quietly cracking. She doesn't realize what she's rubbing on me, I thought. She's rubbing her niece's entire life responsibility onto me, and she doesn't even see it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there running the math, not the financial math, the emotional math. Every sacrifice had flowed in one direction. Every priority pointed at one person. And my wife had just told me without blinking that she'd rather we never have children than risk Simi losing access to an elite school. The next morning, I did something I never imagined I'd do. I called a private investigator. The PI's name was Garrett. Ex-cop, small office above a dry cleaner, the kind of man who shook your hand once and never smiled. I told him what I needed background on my wife's family, specifically her sister Noreen and the custody arrangement for Simi. How deep, he asked. Deep enough to understand what I'm being asked to sign. He didn't judge. He quoted a fee. I paid it. 2 weeks. That's all it took to unmake everything. Garrett called on a Wednesday afternoon. I stepped outside the warehouse into the loading dock, leaned against a shipping container still warm from the sun, and listened. There's no custody arrangement, he said. Because there's no niece. My hand tightened on the phone. Simi's birth certificate lists Harper as the mother. Full biological mother. Born 6 years ago at a county hospital back in her hometown. Father's name is on the certificate too, a man named Dennis Okafor. He's not in the picture anymore, hasn't been since before the birth. I didn't say anything. The loading dock hummed with forklifts and reversing trucks, and none of it reached me. Noreen does exist, Garrett continued. She is Harper's older sister. She is divorced, but she never had a daughter. She provided cover during Harper's pregnancy, told neighbors she was the one expecting. The mother, Dolores, coordinated the story. Small town, tight community, unmarried pregnancy carries weight there. So Simi is your wife's biological child, has been the entire time. I sat on that loading dock for 40 minutes after hanging up. A coworker asked if I was sick. I said yes. It wasn't a lie. I waited 3 days. Not because I needed to calm down. I was past calm, past anger, somewhere in the flat terrain beyond both. I waited because I wanted the full dossier. Garrett delivered it Friday evening. Birth certificate hospital records a timeline of Harper's pregnancy, cross-referenced with her employment gaps. A statement from a neighbor in her hometown who remembered Noreen's pregnancy and how Harper had taken the baby to the city shortly after. Every page was a brick pulled from a wall I'd built my life against. Friday night. Harper was folding Simi's school clothes on the couch. Simi was asleep in the spare bedroom, our spare bedroom, the one that might have been a nursery if my wife hadn't told me with a closed face that we should never have children. I set the birth certificate on the coffee table. Harper's hand stopped mid-fold. She looked at it. Her jaw moved, but nothing came out for a long moment. Is Simi your daughter? It's not what you think. Harper. Is Simi your biological daughter? She picked up the birth certificate and I watched her cycle through options behind her eyes the same way I'd watched her cycle through expenses, through justifications, through every careful redirection that had kept me blind for years. I adopted her, she said. At birth. Noreen couldn't. Stop. I opened the folder. Spread the hospital records across the table. The admission form with Harper's name. The discharge summary. The prenatal visit log showing 7 appointments over 6 months, all under Harper's name, all at the county clinic. You were admitted for labor and delivery, I said. You didn't adopt anyone. You gave birth to her. Harper's hands dropped to her lap. The school shirt she'd been folding slipped to the floor and she didn't pick it up. Dennis left when I was 5 months pregnant. Her voice came out, stripped mechanical. Every boyfriend before him left. My mother said no man would want a woman with another man's child. She said, so you invented a sister's tragedy to hide your own. I was trying to protect Simi. You were trying to protect the lie that would land you a husband willing to pay for her. That's not the adoption. You wanted me to legally adopt your own daughter so she could attend a school that requires times parents, times with high school diplomas. Not Noreen's kid. Yours. And you couldn't list yourself because somewhere in this web, Simi's school records say she's Noreen's child and Noreen never graduated. So you needed me. You needed my name, my signature, my entire legal identity grafted onto a lie you built before you ever sat on that bus. She was crying. I want to tell you I felt something. I'm searching for it even now. Some residual tenderness, some reflex toward the woman I'd proposed to after 11 months. But what I felt was the specific emptiness of realizing you've been furniture in someone else's plan. You need to leave, I said. You can't be serious. Take Simi. Go to Noreen's. Go to your mother's. But you can't stay here. She left that night. Simi woke up confused, clutching a stuffed rabbit, and Harper carried her out without looking back. The divorce papers arrived at her mother's house on a Monday. Harper called within the hour. Over times, her voice was incredulous. I never cheated on you. I never touched another man. And you're divorcing me over paperwork. Paperwork. She called it paperwork. An entire fabricated identity, a fake family structure, a manufactured backstory, a premeditated adoption scheme designed to cement the deception legally, and she reduced it to times paperwork, asterisk. Dolores called next. Weeping. Please don't do this. You'll make both my daughters divorced women. People will talk. Please. I hung up. Not out of cruelty. Out of the recognition that this family had built a machine designed to process my compassion into compliance. And even now, even times caught times, they were pulling the same levers. Harper contested the divorce for a month. Then she signed. I expected grief. What came instead was something closer to the feeling of stepping outside after being in a room with no windows. Not joy, just air. Just the sudden, startling presence of oxygen where there had been none. I think about that bus sometimes. The 9C, the fluorescent buzz, the 2 rows of cracked vinyl between us. I think about how I fell in love with a woman's devotion to a child and never once questioned the story that framed it. The devotion was real, I'll give her that. Harper loved Simi with everything she had. But she loved her enough to build a lie so complete that it consumed a marriage, a man's savings, and 3 years of someone else's life. Run the check before you fall. Not because love is transactional, but because the person you trust most may be the one most invested in your ignorance. And by the time you see clearly, the cost is already yours.
Story 2.
My wife cheated on me with her finance mentor, told everyone I was jealous of her success, and then lost every single dollar she had when the whole thing turned out to be a scam. Meanwhile, I'm the idiot who taught himself investing from YouTube videos for free and actually made money. Funny how that works, right? So here's the situation. My wife got obsessed with getting rich quick, started sleeping with some smooth-talking guy from a financial seminar, drained over $100,000 into what turned out to be a Ponzi scheme, and then had the audacity to show up at my door, asking me to take her back after the guy fled the country with her money. I'm 39 male. My wife, well, ex-wife now is Anna, she's 36. The so-called mentor she was sleeping with, that's D. And then there's Gloria, Anna's mom, 62, sweetest woman alive, who tried her best to fix what her daughter burned to the ground. Let me take you back to where this all started. Anna and I had been married for 7 years. For 6 of those years, she was the most grounded person I knew. She clipped coupons. She kept a spreadsheet for groceries. She once returned a lamp because she found it $11 cheaper at another store. That was the woman I married. The shift started with a podcast. She found some finance influencer, I never even learned the guy's real name, who ran this whole ecosystem of content. Podcasts, YouTube Lives, Instagram Reels, weekend seminars. His whole pitch was that ordinary people were leaving generational wealth on the table because they were too scared to invest aggressively. He talked fast, wore tailored suits, and had this way of making you feel stupid for keeping money in a savings account. Anna devoured it. Every episode. Every clip. She started using phrases like asset allocation and leveraged positions and high-yield alternative vehicles at dinner, and honestly, at first I thought it was great. My wife wants to learn about money. Fantastic. I didn't know much about investing myself. I'd always been a save what you can, don't touch the 401k kind of guy. Boring. Predictable. But it kept us stable. Then came the seminar. It was a Saturday workshop downtown, $200 a ticket. Anna came home glowing. Not just excited times, glowing asterisk. She talked for 45 minutes straight about the speakers, the energy in the room, the community of high performers she connected with. And then she mentioned D. He's one of the senior mentors, she said, barely looking at me while she scrolled through her phone. He personally manages a portfolio worth millions. He said I have real instinct. I smiled. That's great, babe. That was my first mistake. Not the smile, the not asking questions. Over the next 2 months, D became a recurring character in every conversation. D said this about crypto. D thinks index funds are for people who've given up. D has a private investment circle, very exclusive, only for people he personally selects. Anna started attending weekly mentorship sessions, then bi-weekly. Then she was going to Dee's office, some co-working space downtown, on random Tuesday nights. I noticed the wardrobe changes before anything else. Anna had always dressed well, but practically. Suddenly she was buying things I'd never seen her wear. Tighter dresses, heels for a Tuesday, perfume that wasn't the vanilla one she'd worn since college. She started doing her makeup differently, sharper, more deliberate for what she called networking events. My stomach knew before my brain did. Then the money conversation started. I'm going to pause my half of the mortgage this month, she told me. One evening, casual as ordering takeout. I set my fork down. Pause it. Dee says liquidity is everything right now. There's a window opening in the next 6 weeks, and I need capital positioned. I'll double it back easy. Anna, that's our mortgage, and I'll cover 2 months when the return hits. You don't understand how this works. That became her favorite sentence. Asterisk, you don't understand how this works. Asterisk. She said it when I questioned the $5,000 wire transfer. She said it when I found a receipt for a $3,200 advanced mentorship package. She said it when she pulled $40,000 from her personal savings money she'd been building since before we met and moved it into an account I had no access to. You've never taken a single risk in your life, she said one night when I pressed too hard. That's why we're still living like this. She gestured around our apartment. The apartment I loved. The apartment we'd painted together. I stopped arguing. Not because she convinced me. Because something behind her eyes had gone cold and I realized I wasn't talking to my wife anymore. I was talking to someone who'd already decided I was the obstacle. The late nights got later. She started silencing her phone around me. She'd come home smelling like a restaurant we couldn't afford wine on her breath and go straight to the shower. I did what I told myself I'd never do. I checked her location one night when she said she was at a portfolio review session. She was at a cafe in Midtown. So I drove there. I parked across the street. Through the window, I could see them at a corner table. Dee was older than I expected, mid-40s, silver at the temples, expensive watch catching the light. His hand was on Anna's thigh, not resting, moving. She was leaning into him, laughing with her whole body, her fingers tracing circles on his forearm. I sat in that car for 11 minutes. I know because I watched the clock so I wouldn't scream. When she came home that night, I was sitting in the dark living room. She jumped when she saw me. We need to talk, I said. About what? About Dee's hand on your leg at that cafe tonight. The color drained from her face. For exactly 3 seconds. Then something rearranged behind her eyes, and she straightened her spine. Fine, she said. Yes. I slept with him. But you need to understand it's not what you think. Explain to me what it is then. It's transactional. Dee doesn't mentor just anyone. There's a closeness required, an intimacy. It's how he operates. And what I'm getting in return is worth. You're telling me you traded sex for financial advice. I'm telling you I made a times investment asterisk. I stared at her. She didn't blink. She packed her things that weekend. No tears, no apology. She told me she'd been outgrowing this marriage for years and that I'd thank her eventually. She told her friends. She told her coworkers. She told times Gloria, times her own mother, that I was jealous of her progress. She labeled me as controlling, jealous, and whatnot. I listened with a clenched jaw and said nothing. Because what do you say to someone rewriting history in real time? The divorce was brutal, but mercifully clean. She didn't contest anything because Dee had apparently told her lawyers were a waste of capital. The joint account was closed and the money was split between us. We have no children, so there was no question of child support. Thank God we don't have children. It would have made the situation so complex. She'd been telling everyone that I would go back to her begging for reconciliation when she becomes rich after learning the personal finance ropes. I said good luck. For 3 months I heard nothing. Just silence and secondhand reports that Anna was thriving and building an empire. Then one morning I opened the news on my phone and saw Dee's face staring back at me right next to the words asterisk asterisk FBI, asterisk 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 asterisk, fraud asterisk asterisk and asterisk asterisk, fled the country asterisk asterisk. The article was clinical in its details. The finance influencer, the one whose name I never bothered to learn, had been running a Ponzi-style operation for nearly 4 years. Hundreds of victims across 12 states. The high-yield alternative vehicles were nothing. Empty accounts, shuffling money between shells. The senior mentors like Dee weren't financial advisors. They were recruiters. Salesmen. Their job was to identify marks, build trust, extract capital, and move on. Dee had been particularly effective. The article noted he'd cultivated intimate personal relationships with several female investors to deepen financial commitment. They used that exact phrase. Asterisk. Cultivated intimate personal relationships. Asterisk. Like he was tending a garden. The influencer had fled to Dubai. Dee had gone to Cyprus. Between them, they'd disappeared with somewhere north of $14 million in other people's money. I set my phone down and stared at the ceiling for a long time. Then I did something I didn't expect. I laughed. Not a happy laugh. not a vindictive one. Just the involuntary sound your body makes when reality lands so precisely on the spot you feared it would that it almost feels scripted. Within a week, the secondhand reports changed tone. Anna hadn't just lost the $40,000 from her savings. She'd gone deeper, much deeper. Somewhere in those months of thriving and building an empire, she'd liquidated everything. Her full savings, over $100,000, accumulated across 15 years of coupon clipping and spreadsheet keeping. Her retirement account, and the thing that made my chest physically hurt when I heard it, her grandmother's jewelry. Pieces Gloria had passed down. A ruby brooch from the 1940s. A pearl set that survived immigration and 2 wars. Anna had sold them to a jeweler downtown and wired the cash directly into one of Dee's shell accounts. Gone. All of it. The people she'd bragged to coworkers, friends, the Instagram followers she'd accumulated during her wealth journey, they turned on her with the same energy she'd used on me. Screenshots of her old posts circulated, the ones where she'd mocked people with savings accounts. The ones where she'd called 9-to-5 workers voluntarily poor. Someone even dug up a story she'd posted about me without naming me, calling her ex-husband a man terrified of his own potential. Now every comment section had the same punchline. And it was her. I didn't participate, I didn't share anything, I didn't even read most of it. But I'd be lying if I said I felt nothing. I felt everything. Anger, grief, a sick satisfaction I'm not proud of, and underneath all of it, a sadness so heavy it sat in my ribs like wet concrete. Because the woman who lost everything was still the woman who'd once driven 40 minutes to bring me soup when I had the flu. People aren't one thing. That's what makes betrayal so disorienting. She showed up at my door on a Thursday evening. No makeup, hair unwashed. Wearing a sweatshirt I recognized from our closet, she must have taken it when she packed. Can I come in? Please. 5 minutes. I stepped onto the porch and closed the door behind me. She looked like she'd dropped 15 pounds in the wrong way. Her eyes were swollen. Her hands wouldn't stay still. I know what you're thinking, she started. I doubt it. Dee used me. Everything he told me was a lie. The mentorship, the returns, she stopped. Swallowed. The relationship? There was no relationship. He used me to get my money. That proves there was nothing real between us. Which means what, Anna? Which means it wasn't really cheating. Not in the way you think. I was manipulated. I let that sentence hang in the air between us. She watched my face, searching for a crack. You told me it was transactional, I said quietly. You told me you made it a times investment. Asterisk, those were your words. You weren't confused. You were proud. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. I'm sorry about your money, I said. Genuinely. But you need to leave. She cried on my porch for a few minutes after I went inside. I stood behind the door and listened. Then she left. Gloria called me 2 weeks later, asked if we could meet for coffee. I almost said no. But Gloria had never been anything but kind to me even during the divorce, even when Anna was painting me as the villain. She'd sent me a card that simply said, times, I'm sorry. You deserved better. Asterisk. So I went. She looked older than 62. She stirred her coffee without drinking it. She's not eating, Gloria said. She won't leave the apartment. I found her looking up Dee's name for 4 hours straight last Tuesday, like she could will him back into the country. I'm sorry, Gloria. She made a terrible mistake. Many terrible mistakes. But she's my daughter, and she's drowning. I understand. Could you just talk to her? You don't have to take her back. Just let her know she's not Gloria. I put my hand on hers. I love you. You were the best mother-in-law I could have asked for. But I can't be Anna's life raft. Not after what she did. Not after how she did it. Her eyes filled. She nodded slowly like she'd known the answer before she asked. Take care of yourself, she whispered. You too. The months after that were the quietest of my life. And the most productive, I started walking, then running. I dropped 26 pounds by winter. I pulled my old easel out of storage and started painting again. Terrible at first, then less terrible, then something I actually looked forward to each evening. And the investing. The thing Anna mocked me for not understanding. I started learning. Not from a guru, not from a seminar. From free YouTube channels run by CPAs and certified financial planners who gave away the same information Dee charged thousands for. I opened a brokerage account with $500. I read, I watched, I made small, boring, disciplined moves. Index funds, dividend stocks, dollar cost averaging, the stuff Anna called giving up. Within 8 months, my portfolio was up 14%. Not millions, not an empire, but real. Mine. Built on nothing but patience and free information. I still think about Anna sometimes. Not with hatred, not even with satisfaction. Just with the strange heavy clarity of watching someone burn down their own house and knowing you couldn't have stopped them even if you tried. She wanted a shortcut to wealth and lost everything. I took the long road and found something she never looked for, the quiet, unglamorous version of enough.
Story 3.
My stepmother buried my father without telling me. No call, no text, nothing. She sealed him in the ground and then had the nerve to show up at my hotel room asking for money. So here's the short version. My dad's wife of 15 years treated me and my sister like we were trespassing in our own home until we finally left. When Dad died, she rushed the funeral so we'd miss it, then called us vultures for showing up. What she didn't know was that Dad had been planning his final move for years, and the lawyer had a letter that changed everything. I'm a 32-year-old guy. My sister is Claire. She's 28. My stepmother is Judy. Her daughter Brianna was 12 at the time. My uncle Gerald is the one who even told us Dad was gone. My girlfriend Megan drove with us through the night to get there. And my father was Richard, 65 years old, a quiet man who apparently had a lot more to say than any of us realized. To understand what Judy did at the end, you have to understand what she did at the beginning. My mother died on a Tuesday in March. Ovarian cancer. She was 43. I was 17. Claire was 13. We buried her in the cemetery behind the church where my parents got married, and my father stood at the graveside like someone had scooped out everything inside him and left just the shell standing there in a black suit. For about 6 months, it was the three of us. Quiet dinners. Claire doing homework at the kitchen table while Dad stared at the television without watching it. I'd hear him at night sometimes walking the hallway, stopping outside their bedroom door like he'd forgotten she wasn't in there anymore. Then one Saturday, he sat us down and told us he'd met someone. Her name was Judy. She was a receptionist at his doctor's office. She had a daughter named Brianna, who was about 2 at the time. He said Judy made him feel like he could breathe again. He said he hoped we'd give her a chance. 3 weeks later, they were married. I remember Claire looking at me across the living room when he told us, her eyes wide and glassy, her mouth slightly open. She didn't say a word. Neither did I. What do you say to a man who's drowning and tells you he's found a life raft? You don't slap it out of his hands, even if something about it doesn't float right. Judy was sweet at first, performatively sweet. She'd call me hun and ask Claire about school and make pot roast on Sundays. But only when Dad was in the room. The moment he left, went to work, stepped outside, drove to the hardware store, her face would just reset, like someone toggling off a light switch. Don't leave your shoes there. This isn't a frat house. Claire, I already told you not to touch my things in the bathroom. Do I need to put a lock on it? Your father works hard enough without you two making messes he has to come home to. Small things at first, then not small. She rearranged the house within the first month. Our mother's photos came down from the hallway. Too depressing, she told Dad. You need to heal, Richard. She redecorated the living room. Threw out the quilt Mom had kept on the couch since before I was born. When Claire cried about it, Judy told Dad that Claire was having adjustment issues and maybe needed therapy. Claire didn't need therapy. Claire needed someone to stop erasing our mother from every surface of the house. By the time Brianna was old enough to talk, she'd absorbed Judy's frequency perfectly. She'd walk into my room without knocking, take things off my desk, and if I said anything, she'd scream until Judy came running. Then it was my fault. Always my fault. She's a child. You're practically an adult. Act like it. I left at 18. Didn't even finish the summer after graduation. Packed 2 bags, drove to my Uncle Gerald's house 3 states away, and called Dad from the road. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I understand, son. That was it. 3 words. I wanted him to say, times come back. Asterisk. I wanted him to say, times I'll fix this. Asterisk. He said, times I understand times, and the line went dead. Claire lasted 2 more years. She called me the night she left, sobbing so hard I could barely make out the words. She was 15. Judy had told her she couldn't go to a school dance because Brianna felt excluded. When Claire protested, Judy said, and I'll never forget this because Claire repeated it to me 3 times like she couldn't believe it herself. Your father chose this family. Maybe it's time you respect that. Asterisk. This time's family. As if Claire and I were the previous tenants, she moved in with her aunt on Mom's side. Dad paid for it. He always paid. That was his language. Money, wired, tuition, covered, car insurance handled. Never a confrontation with Judy. Never a stand taken. Just checks written in silence like a man feeding birds through a window he refused to open. Years passed. I built a life. Got a job in logistics, met Megan, rented a place that felt like mine. Claire finished college, started teaching. We didn't talk about Dad much. It hurt too specifically. Then about 3 years ago, he just showed up. No warning. no call. He was standing outside my apartment building on a Saturday morning, thinner than I remembered, his hair gone fully white. He had a small suitcase. His hands were shaking. "Thought I'd visit," he said. "If that's okay." He stayed 4 days. Megan cooked dinner every night, and Dad sat at our small table like a man who'd wandered out of a desert and found water. He talked more than I'd heard him talk in years. He asked about my work. He asked Megan about her family, and when she told him she'd lost her own father at 16, something shifted behind his eyes. He reached across the table and squeezed her hand. On the third night, we were cleaning up after dinner, and he stopped drying a plate mid-motion. Just stopped. His chin buckled. He set the plate down, carefully gripped the counter, and said, "I don't know how many more of these I get." I didn't say anything. I just stood next to him until his breathing steadied. He started visiting every few months after that. Sometimes he'd see Claire too. Each visit he looked a little smaller, a little grayer. His doctor had found something in his lungs. He was vague about it, the way he was vague about everything that mattered, but we could see it. The cough that wouldn't quit. The stairs he took one at a time. He never once mentioned Judy during those visits. Not once. Then Uncle Gerald called me on a Wednesday evening, his voice strange and tight. "Your father's gone," he said. "Died this morning." My legs gave out. I sat on the kitchen floor. Megan found me there. "Gerald," I managed. "The funeral, when is it?" The silence on his end told me everything. It was Dad's neighbors who had informed Uncle Gerald when he saw all of us missing from the funeral. Uncle then informed the other relatives for us. I called Judy to ask about the arrangements. She didn't talk to me properly. Her daughter took the phone from her and said Judy was too distraught with the loss and wasn't in a state to talk, but none of them sounded depressed. My sister Megan and I left for the house immediately. We lived some 1,000 miles away, and it took us a while to reach that place. Uncle Gerald lived closer, so he was able to arrive before us. After reaching the house, he got to know from the neighbors that the body was already taken for burial, followed by the funeral. The neighbors also informed us that Dad was not keeping well for a long time. She'd buried him within 36 hours. No announcement, no waiting. She put my father in the ground like she was taking out the trash before company arrived. And when we finally pulled into that churchyard parking lot, exhausted, wrecked 12 hours on the road with nothing but coffee and silence, Judy was standing at the gate with Brianna beside her, arms crossed, waiting, like she'd been expecting us all along. Judy's mouth was already moving before we'd closed the car doors. Well, look who finally decided to show up. Claire was out first. She'd barely slept. Her eyes were swollen almost shut, and she walked toward Judy with the kind of stillness that comes right before something detonates. "Where is he?" Claire said. Judy tilted her head. "Buried. Yesterday." Beautiful service. The people who actually cared about him were there. I felt Megan's hand on my arm. Steadying. I hadn't realized I was shaking. "You didn't call us," I said. "You buried our father and you didn't." I tried. Judy's voice was rehearsed, polished, smooth. I called. I reached out. You people are impossible to get a hold of when it's not about money. Brianna, 12 years old, and standing with her mother's exact posture, arms crossed, chin lifted, one hip cocked, said Mom was devastated and you weren't even here. Because nobody told us, Claire's voice cracked open across the churchyard. A couple walking the path near the old graves turned to look. "He was our father, our time's father, asterisk, and you put him in the ground like what?" Judy stepped forward. "Like the man I took care of for 15 years while his own children couldn't be bothered, while you two were off living your lives and he was here sick, needing someone to drive him to appointments and sit with him at 3 in the Poplus morning when he couldn't breathe." The silence that followed was surgical. She knew exactly where to cut. Uncle Gerald appeared from behind the church, walking with a purpose that made his bad knee irrelevant. He'd been here since the previous evening, talking to neighbors, piecing together the timeline. He stopped beside me and put his hand on my shoulder. Didn't say a word to Judy, didn't even look at her. "The grave's in the back," he said quietly. "East side, near the fence." We walked. Judy called something after us, something about property and trespassing and lawyers, but the words dissolved in the distance. The grass was wet. The headstone wasn't up yet, just a temporary marker with his name on a small metal plate. Asterisk, Richard Allen Mercer. Asterisk. Claire dropped to her knees. The sound she made wasn't crying. It was something older than that, something from the center of her body. I stood behind her with my hand on her shoulder, staring at the freshly turned earth, and thought times I never got to see his face again. She took that from us. She took the last look. Asterisk. Megan stood a few feet back, giving us the space. When I finally turned around, her cheeks were wet, and she was pressing both hands over her mouth. The lawyer's office was downtown above a hardware store. Mr. Whitfield had contacted Gerald 2 days after the burial, said there was a reading, said attendance was required, specifically mine and Claire's. Judy was already seated when we arrived. She dressed up, Black dress, pearl earrings, her hair done. Brianna sat beside her playing on a phone. Judy didn't look at us when we walked in. She looked at Mr. Whitfield with the patient expression of someone waiting to collect what they were owed. Mr. Whitfield was a thin man with reading glasses and the demeanor of someone who had delivered bad news so many times it no longer registered on his face. He opened a folder, adjusted his glasses, and began. The house went to Judy. Temporary occupancy, 5 years. After that, it transferred to Claire and me jointly. Judy's smile held. The life insurance policy, $600,000 went entirely to Claire and me, split evenly. The smile flickered. The trust fund, built over decades, conservatively managed, valued at just over $400,000, went entirely to Claire and me. The smile died. That's Judy started. There's a letter, Mr. Whitfield said without looking up. He produced an envelope, cream-colored, sealed with tape that had yellowed. My father's handwriting on the front. Just 2 words, times, my children. Asterisk. Judy stood up. This is contestable. I was his wife for 15 years. I have rights. Mrs. Mercer, Mr. Whitfield said, and his voice was the quietest thing in the room. Your husband updated this, 14 months ago. He was of sound mind. He sat in that chair, he pointed to the one I was sitting in, and he was very specific about his wishes. A pause. Very specific. Judy grabbed Brianna's arm and walked out. The door didn't slam. It clicked shut with a small, precise sound that was somehow worse. She came to the hotel that night. Knocked softly. When I opened the door, her mascara was streaked, and her shoulders were curled inward, and she hugged me. Asterisk. Hugged me? Asterisk. Pressed her face into my chest and sobbed. I loved him, she whispered. I loved him so much. And now I have nothing. Brianna has nothing. I stood perfectly still. Let her perform. I'm not asking for all of it, she said, pulling back, dabbing her eyes. Just 30% of the trust for Brianna's future. She's a child she deserves. I laughed. I didn't mean to. It just came out a single sharp bark of disbelief. Claire, I called toward the adjoining room. Come hear this. Claire appeared in the doorway. Judy looked between us, recalculating. 30%, I repeated for Claire's benefit. Claire's expression didn't change. She just slowly closed her eyes and shook her head. Judy's face reset. That same toggle. Sweet to steal in half a second. You'll regret this, she said. Both of you. You're just like him. Cowards who hide behind. Good night, Judy. I closed the door. Claire and I sat on the edge of the bed and I opened the letter. His handwriting was shaky, the letters climbing uphill the way they do when someone's hands won't cooperate. It took us 3 tries to get through it because one of us kept breaking down and the other would have to take over. He said he was sorry. He said he cursed himself every single day. He said marrying Judy was the act of a man so terrified of the dark that he grabbed the first hand he found, and by the time he realized whose hand it was, his children were already gone. He said the visits to my apartment were the only times in 15 years he felt like himself. He said Megan's pot roast reminded him of Mom's. He said, times I never stopped being your father. I just stopped deserving to be. Asterisk. We read it 100 times. We're still reading it.
Story 4.
While I was holding my 11-year-old son's hand in the ICU, praying he wouldn't follow his mother into the grave, my in-laws were inside my house loading boxes of my dead wife's jewelry into their car. My wife Catherine died in the same crash that nearly killed our boy Liam. And before I could even bury her, her own mother and sister had cleaned out our home, taken her heirlooms, her trust fund documents, everything claiming it belonged to them by blood. The kicker, I was the one paying their bills. I'm a 45-year-old father of 2. My wife was Catherine, a nurse, the kindest person I've ever known, gone at 40. My mother-in-law is Dolores. My sister-in-law is Vivian, and trust me, you'll understand why I say her name like that. My kids are Liam 11 and Ellie 9. And this is the story of how the people who were supposed to grieve beside me tried to rob my children blind. Catherine used to say her mother's love was like weather, you couldn't control it, you just dressed for it. I never understood what she meant until the day I came home from the hospital and found our bedroom closets empty. But I need to back up. Catherine and I met when I was 27, and she was 22, a nursing student pulling double shifts at a free clinic downtown. I lost my parents, young car accident. Ironically, the universe apparently enjoys that kind of symmetry, and I'd built myself from nothing. Software consulting. Long hours, decent money, no one to spend it on until her. Catherine's family was different. Dolores had raised 3 kids on a teacher's pension. Vivian, the eldest, Catherine, and Gerald, the youngest. They were close the way families are close when money is tight, bound together by necessity more than warmth. When Catherine's grandmother passed and left her entire estate to Catherine, not Vivian, not Gerald, but Catherine, Specifically because Catherine had been the one driving 3 hours every weekend to care for her, it cracked something in. That family that never healed. Vivian never forgave it. She smiled at our wedding. She cooed over our babies. But Catherine told me once late at night, her voice thin, "Viv looks at me sometimes like I stole something from her." The inheritance wasn't extravagant. Jewelry that had been in the family 4 generations. A modest trust fund. Some antique furniture. But to Vivian, it represented a verdict that Catherine was the better daughter, the better granddaughter, and that verdict burned. Catherine used the trust fund conservatively. College savings for Liam and Ellie. She kept the jewelry in our home safe, wore her grandmother's ring on holidays, and told the kids stories about each piece. This brooch was great-grandma's. She wore it the day she became a citizen. The heirlooms weren't wealth to her. They were narrative, they were identity. Meanwhile, I quietly started covering Dolores' mortgage when her pension couldn't keep up. Then her medical bills. Then her utilities. Catherine asked me to, and I didn't hesitate. That was the deal. You marry someone, you marry the ecosystem. $3,000 a month, sometimes more. For years. Then November 14th happened. Catherine was driving Liam home from soccer practice. A pickup ran a red light at 45 miles per hour and hit the driver's side. Catherine died on impact. Liam's left leg was shattered in 3 places, his spleen ruptured, and he had a traumatic brain bleed that required emergency surgery. I got the call at 4:47 p.m. I remember because I was helping Ellie with fractions at the kitchen table, and the pencil she was holding rolled off the edge when I stood up. It's still under the refrigerator. I haven't moved it. The next 72 hours were a corridor of fluorescent light and beeping machines. Liam was in a medically induced coma. I didn't leave his side. Ellie stayed with my neighbor, a saint named Ruth, who asked no questions and made grilled cheese sandwiches until the bread ran out. I miss Catherine's funeral. My own wife's funeral. Dolores organized it. I didn't object. I couldn't object. I was watching my son's oxygen levels like they were a stock ticker that measured whether my life was worth living. Vivian called me once during those 3 days, not to offer comfort, to ask where Catherine kept the family things. I said, "Vivian, my son might die." She said, "I understand that, but mother needs closure, and those pieces belong with blood family." I hung up. When Liam stabilized on day 4, and I finally drove home at 2 a.m., I knew before I opened the front door. The house had that hollow feeling like a tooth socket after an extraction. Our bedroom safe was open and empty. Catherine's jewelry box, gone. The antique writing desk from her grandmother, gone. The filing cabinet where she kept the trust fund documents, emptied. They'd even taken the framed photograph of Catherine's grandmother from the hallway wall. I sat on the bedroom floor for 40 minutes. I didn't cry. I was past crying. I just sat there cataloging absence. The next morning, I called Dolores. Her voice was shaky, rehearsed. "Sweetheart, there was no malice. These are family heirlooms. They should be with family." "I am family, Dolores. Your grandchildren are family." Vivian says Catherine would have wanted. Catherine is dead. My voice broke on the word. Don't tell me what she would have wanted. Silence. Then Vivian is the eldest daughter. She's the rightful heir to mother's estate. Rightful heir. That was Vivian's vocabulary, not Dolores's. I could hear the puppet strings. I called a lawyer the next day. Mr. Hadley was a referral from a colleague, mid-50s, reading glasses perpetually on his forehead, the kind of man who shook your hand like he was already representing you. He listened to everything, took notes without interrupting, then leaned back. They entered your home without permission and removed property. That's theft regardless of relation. But here's my concern. Do you have documentation of your wife's wishes? I didn't. Catherine had talked about a will but kept postponing it. She was 40. She thought she had time. Then we file for return of property and challenge any claim they make to the trust. But they'll fight. People who steal from grieving men aren't people who back down easily. He was right. The legal demand letter went out. Vivian's response came through her own attorney within a week, a counter-challenge claiming Catherine's inheritance was family property held in temporary custody by the marriage, and that Dolores, as surviving mother, held superior claim. Mr. Hadley read it aloud to me and then removed his glasses. This is nonsense legally. But it'll cost you time and money to prove it. So began the war. Court dates stacked up like unpaid bills. Meanwhile, Liam came home in a wheelchair, his left leg held together with titanium rods, his eyes carrying something no 11-year-old's eyes should carry. He asked me once very quietly while I was changing his bandages, "Dad, if I wasn't at practice, would Mom have been on that road?" I set down the gauze. I knelt until we were eye level. "This was not your fault." Not one piece of it. He nodded. He didn't believe me. Ellie processed differently, quietly, almost administratively. She started organizing Catherine's remaining things with terrifying precision, folding her mother's scarves, alphabetizing her books. When she realized the jewelry was gone, she came to me with a face so controlled it scared me. "Where's Mom's stuff, Dad?" "Grandma Dolores is holding on to some things. We're working on getting them back." "Vivian took them," she said. Not a question. Thanksgiving arrived like an unwelcome relative. Dolores invited us. Mr. Hadley advised against going. I went anyway for the kids who needed something resembling normalcy. The dinner was a performance. Vivian carved the turkey wearing Catherine's grandmother's brooch. She caught me looking and didn't flinch. Dolores talked too much about nothing. Gerald sat at the end of the table, silent, studying his plate like it contained instructions for how to be a man. I kept paying Dolores's bills through all of it. $3,000 a month to a woman suing me for my children's inheritance? Catherine would have wanted it. That's what I told myself anyway. Then, in early December, I got a notification from the bank. An automated reminder about a safe deposit box, one I didn't know existed, registered under Catherine's name with me listed as secondary. I drove to the bank the next morning with hands I couldn't keep steady. The clerk led me to the vault. Inside the box was a sealed envelope in Catherine's handwriting. I opened it, standing right there under those fluorescent lights that seemed to follow every critical moment of my life now. It was a handwritten will. Dated, signed, witnessed by 2 colleagues at the hospital. And it named Liam and Ellie explicitly, unambiguously by full legal name as the sole heirs to everything. Every piece of jewelry. Every dollar of the trust. Everything. My hands were shaking so badly the paper rattled. The clerk asked if I was okay. I wasn't okay. But for the first time in weeks, I had a weapon. I called Mr. Hadley from the parking lot. He listened, then exhaled slowly. "Bring it to my office. Today. Don't tell anyone, not Dolores, not Vivian, nobody. What happens when we present this? Their case disintegrates. But here's what you need to prepare for people like Vivian. Don't lose gracefully. When the money disappears, they'll reach for the next thing they can take." I didn't understand what he meant. Not yet. Mr. Hadley presented the will on a Tuesday morning in January. I watched from the gallery as Vivian's attorney read it, then reread it, then set it down like it was contaminated. Vivian herself went pale, not the pale of shock, but the pale of a gambler watching the dealer flip the last card. The judge ordered authentication. Handwriting analysis. Verification of the witnesses, 2 ER nurses Catherine had worked with for a decade, both of whom submitted affidavits within 48 hours. The document was airtight. Catherine, who procrastinated on everything from oil changes to dentist appointments, had been meticulous about the one thing that mattered most. It took a few more hearings for the court to give this judgment. As per the court's ruling, the items were returned back to me. My mother-in-law was upset that I didn't tell her about the will. I said I was not supposed to reveal that. It was nothing personal. I just wanted to secure my children's future, who rightly deserved my wife's belongings. Dolores's face when I said that, it folded inward like a house settling on a cracked foundation. She didn't yell. She just looked at me with something worse than anger. Betrayal. As if I were the one who'd broken into someone's home and emptied their closets. Then Vivian made her next move, exactly as Mr. Hadley predicted. The custody petition arrived on a Friday. Allegations of neglect, emotional instability, an unsafe home environment for minor children. Dolores's name was on it as the petitioning grandparent, but the language was Vivian's clinical, weaponized every sentence designed to make a grieving father sound like a danger. Mr. Hadley called me that evening. "I told you, when the money disappeared, they'd reach for the next thing. My children aren't a times thing, asterisk. To Vivian, they are. They're the last leverage she has." The custody hearing was the worst day of my life that didn't involve a hospital. Worse than the fluorescent corridors. Worse than the empty safe. Because Liam and Ellie had to sit in a room with a court-appointed evaluator and answer questions about their father while their grandmother waited outside having put them there. Liam, 11 years old, still doing physical therapy 3 times a week, looked the evaluator in the eye and said, "My dad hasn't slept a full night since Mom died. He sets an alarm every 4 hours to check on me because of my head injury. He reads to my sister every night, even when he's so tired his voice shakes. If that's neglect, I don't know what the word means." Ellie 9 said less. She handed the evaluator a notebook, one of her meticulous inventories. Every meal their father had cooked. Every therapy appointment he'd driven them to. Every bedtime story logged with dates. She'd been keeping records since November, as if some part of her had always known proof would be required. The judge dismissed the custody petition in language I won't repeat in front of my children. Words like times frivolous times and times unconscionable times and times an abuse of this court's resources, asterisk. That night, I sat at the kitchen table and canceled the automatic transfer to Dolores's account. $3,000 a month. I stared at the confirmation screen for a long time. Catherine would have wanted me to keep paying, but Catherine also would have wanted her mother not to try to take her children away from their father. Some debts cancel themselves. She stopped talking to me. I was expecting her to call us on Christmas Eve or New Year's, but she didn't. My children wanted to meet their granny and were upset that she didn't invite us. Actually, I lost my parents at an early age, so my children have my mother-in-law as the only granny. They love her, and I don't want to separate them from her. I told them that she might be busy. I took them out for a picnic, and the three of us enjoyed the festivities together. Liam on crutches now, instead of the wheelchair. Ellie wearing one of Catherine's scarves wrapped twice around her neck because it was too long for her. We ate sandwiches in the car when it got too cold, and nobody mentioned the empty seat. Dolores appeared at my door in March. I almost didn't recognize her. She'd lost weight in a way that signals surrender rather than health. Her coat was wrong for the weather, too thin a spring jacket in the tail end of winter. Vivian stopped returning my calls in January, she said from the porch. Gerald changed his number. I stepped aside. She came in and sat at the kitchen table and told me everything. How Vivian had orchestrated the break-in. How she'd coached Dolores on what to say during the phone calls. How the custody petition had been Vivian's idea, a Hail Mary to maintain access to the trust through guardianship, and how once the court ruled decisively, Vivian and Gerald had simply evaporated. No money left to orbit. She told me Catherine would have wanted it this way, Dolores whispered, and I wanted to believe her, because believing her meant Catherine was still somehow. She stopped. Her hands trembled against the table. I made her tea. I sat across from her, and I said what I'd rehearsed in my head for months but never expected to say aloud. I forgive you, Dolores, but I'm not paying your bills anymore. I'll help you find resources. I'll let you see the kids, but the account is closed. She nodded. She didn't argue. Mr. Hadley, when I told him, pulled his glasses off his forehead and cleaned them slowly. It might be genuine. It might be the next play. You won't know for a while. I know. And you're letting her back in anyway. Catherine would have I stopped myself. That phrase had become a crutch, a way of avoiding my own judgment. I'm letting her back in because Liam and Ellie need a grandmother. And because holding this grudge costs more energy than I have left. The jewelry sits in a new safe, now one the kids know the combination to. Ellie wears the brooch sometimes, the citizenship brooch pinned to her school cardigan, absurdly formal against the plaid. Liam keeps his mother's watch in his nightstand drawer. He doesn't wear it yet. He says he's waiting until it fits. I don't know if Dolores' repentance is real. I don't know if Vivian will resurface when the trust matures. I don't know if Liam will ever stop blaming himself for being at soccer practice that day, or if Ellie will ever stop cataloging the world as insurance against loss. What I know is this: Catherine left her children everything. Not just the jewelry and the trust, the stories behind each piece. The grandmother who drove 3 hours every weekend, the belief that love is something you demonstrate with your hands repeatedly until they give out. That pencil is still under the refrigerator. I check sometimes. It's my proof that there was a before.
Story 5.
My best man had a playpen set up in his bedroom for my infant son, and I was the last person to find out why. My fiancée spent months sneaking into his house, exchanging I love yous on Snapchat, and building a whole second life behind my back, and when I finally caught her, she didn't apologize. She filed a restraining order to try to take my son away from me, then showed up to our baby's doctor appointment and sat in my lap like nothing happened. I'm 23. My ex-fiancée is Megan, she's 21. My former best friend is Tyler, 23, the guy I literally asked to be my best man. And then there's Connor, Tyler's adopted brother, who ended up being the only one with enough conscience to send me the proof that blew everything wide open. Megan and I had been together since we were teenagers. High school sweethearts, the whole small-town fairy tale. By the time our son was born, I thought we were locked and engaged, raising a baby, planning a wedding for August 19th. Tyler had been my closest friend since middle school. When I asked him to be my best man, it felt like the most natural decision I'd ever made. His family had practically adopted us. His mom babysat our son. His house was the place we all gathered on weekends around bonfires, passing beers, feeling like everything was exactly where it was supposed to be. The first crack didn't look like a crack. It looked like a fight about nothing. It started in early summer, Megan spending more and more time at Tyler's place. Not with me, without me. She'd take the baby over there in the afternoon and not come back until late. I'd get home from work and the apartment would be dark and empty. When I brought it up, she'd roll her eyes. His mom watches the baby so I can breathe for 5 minutes. You want me to lose my mind? I didn't push it. Tyler's family was generous. They had space, they had food, they loved our son. I told myself I was being paranoid. Jealousy was ugly. I wasn't going to be that guy. Then came the night of the bonfire. We were all out at a buddy's place mid-June, one of those nights where the smoke smells like summer and everyone's laughing too loud. I had a 4 a.m. shift the next morning, so around midnight I told Megan I was heading home. She wanted to stay. Fine. I kissed her, kissed the baby, drove back to our apartment, set my alarm, and crashed. I woke up at 3:15 a.m. to silence. The bed was empty. Cold. She hadn't come home. I called her. Straight to voicemail. Called again. Voicemail. My chest started doing that thing where it tightens one rib at a time. I called Tyler. He picked up on the fourth ring, groggy. Yeah. Is Megan there? Pause. Yeah, man. She crashed here. She had the baby, didn't want to drive. I was at his house in 12 minutes. When I walked into Tyler's bedroom, Megan was passed out on his bed. Not the couch, not a guest room, his bed. And there in the corner was a playpen. Set up, ready. Like it lived there. My son was asleep in it, pacifier bobbing gently with each breath. Tyler was on the couch in the living room. He sat up when I came in, rubbing his eyes like this was all perfectly normal. She didn't want to wake the baby, he said. I looked at him. Looked at the playpen. Looked at my fiancé in his sheets. Why is there a playpen in your bedroom, Tyler? My mom put it there. For when she babysits. I woke Megan up. She blinked at me, disoriented, then annoyed. What are you doing here? You're in his bed, Megan. I fell asleep. The fire went late. I didn't want to drive with the baby. You could have called me. My phone died. It rang before going to voicemail. That means it was on. Her face shifted. Okay, it didn't die, but I didn't see your calls. I was asleep. 3 stories in 60 seconds. Each one replacing the last without acknowledgement, like the previous version had never existed. I stood there holding my son's diaper bag, watching her rearrange reality in real time, and something in my gut went cold. But I didn't have the proof. I didn't have anything except a feeling and a playpen that shouldn't have been there. So I swallowed it. July 5th broke me open. We'd been fighting for weeks straight about Tyler, about her being gone, about the wedding plans she kept pushing off. That night she left the apartment twice, slamming the door both times, and both times I sat on the kitchen floor with my back against the cabinets, wondering if I was the problem. After she came back the second time, I did something I'm almost embarrassed to admit. I wrote her a letter. Handwritten. Pages. Everything I felt, how much I loved her, how scared I was of losing our family, how I wanted to fix whatever was breaking between us. I left it on her pillow. She read it. She cried. We talked for an hour, voices low, faces closed. She said she was sorry. She said she loved me. We fell asleep, spooning her back, pressed against my chest, my arm around her waist, and for one night I believed we'd survive. Then her phone lit up on the nightstand. I wasn't asleep yet. The screen glowed in the dark. Snapchat notification. Tyler's Bitmoji. I told myself not to look. I told myself for about 4 seconds. I picked up the phone. I opened the app originally, intending to send Tyler a sarcastic message, something like, "Times thanks for finally texting back buddy times," because he'd been dodging me for weeks. But the message thread was already open. And I read everything. Coordinated visits behind my back. Fabricated alibis. Plans for her to come over when I was at work. Pet names. Flirtation that made my stomach lurch. And then clear as a blade. Asterisk, I love you. Asterisk. Asterisk, I love you too. Asterisk. My hands were shaking so hard, the phone nearly slipped. Megan was still curled against me, breathing slow, and even her hair smelling like the same shampoo she'd used since high school. I could feel her heartbeat through her back. I set the phone down. I stared at the ceiling until my alarm went off. When I confronted her the next morning, she didn't deny it. She didn't confirm it either. She went straight to offense. You went through my phone. That's a violation of my privacy. You're telling Tyler you love him. You had no right. Are you sleeping with him? I'm not doing this. For 15 days, she refused to cut Tyler off. 15 days of circular arguments that went nowhere, of her sleeping beside me while texting him, of me begging for honesty from someone who had forgotten what the word meant. On July 21st, I packed a bag and walked out. And that's when Megan stopped pretending and started trying to destroy me. Within 48 hours of me leaving, Megan filed for a full stay-away order of protection against me and our son. Let that land for a second. Not a custody petition, not a request for space. A stay-away order. The kind reserved for people who pose a genuine threat. She wanted a judge to legally prohibit me from being near my own child, the same child she'd been parking in a playpen in another man's bedroom while I worked overnight shifts to keep formula in the cabinet. I found out through a phone call from my mother, who found out from the courthouse. I was sitting in my truck in a gas station parking lot when she told me, and I remember gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white and stayed that way for minutes after I let go. The indentations from the leather stayed pressed into my palms like branding. She had no grounds. No evidence of abuse, no police reports, no witnesses to anything, because there was nothing to witness. But she filed it anyway, banking on the system's default sympathy, banking on the assumption that a young mother's word would outweigh a young father's presence. And while the petition worked its way through the court, she moved into Tyler's house. Officially, with our son. My best man was now playing house with my fiancé and my baby in the same bedroom where I'd found that playpen. Then Connor called. Connor was Tyler's adopted brother, quieter, kept to himself, the kind of guy who sat at the edge of bonfires and watched more than he talked. I hadn't spoken to him since everything imploded. When his name popped up on my phone, I almost didn't answer. "I need to send you something," he said. No greeting. His voice was flat disgusted. "Check your messages. Photos. Screenshots. Megan and Tyler together at the house, not hiding, not careful, just times together, asterisk. Her on the couch with her legs across his lap. Him feeding my son in a high chair like it was his kitchen, his family, his life. Timestamps that overlap with the weeks she'd been swearing nothing was happening. "I can't watch this anymore," Connor said. "My own brother. In our parents' house. It's sick." I stared at the photos until my screen dimmed. Then I sent every single one to Megan's parents, to Tyler's parents, to our mutual friends. To anyone who'd spent the last month hearing her version of events that I was controlling, that I was paranoid that she left because she was times scared times of me. The truth detonated across our entire small town in a single evening. Megan's family went silent. Her mother, who I'd watched cry at our engagement party, stopped returning her calls. Her sister unfollowed her on everything. Tyler's parents, the same people who'd opened their home to us, who'd set up that playpen, who'd fed our son mashed bananas on Sunday mornings, asked Megan to find somewhere else to stay. She didn't. Tyler convinced them to let her remain. The house divided against itself. And then came the doctor's appointment. Our son had a follow-up visit routine scheduled months prior. We were both listed as parents. Both had a right to be there. I arrived early, sat in the waiting room with my hands between my knees, mentally rehearsing how to be civil to a woman who was actively trying to get a restraining order against me. Megan walked in 7 minutes late, and the performance began immediately. She sat down next to me. Not across the room. Not one chair apart. Asterisk. Next to me. Asterisk. Close enough that her thigh pressed against mine. I shifted away. She closed the gap. "How's he been sleeping?" she asked bright-eyed, like we were still a couple comparing notes over breakfast. "Fine." "Is he still doing that thing where he rubs his ear when he's tired? He was doing that last." "He's fine, Megan." She put her hand on my knee. I looked down at it like it was a foreign object. This woman had filed paperwork to keep me away from my child, and now her fingers were resting on my jeans like we were in a waiting room for a sonogram, not a pediatrician's office built on the wreckage of everything she'd burned. When they called our son's name, she stood and looped her arm through mine. I pulled away hard enough that the receptionist glanced up. "Don't touch me." Her eyes went wide, hurt, confused, a masterclass in performed innocence. "I'm just trying to be a good mom. We're here for times him, asterisk." In the exam room, she peppered the doctor with questions she already knew the answers to, nodding earnestly, touching our son's hair, narrating every reaction like a documentary about devoted motherhood. She sat so close to me, our shoulders touched. At one point, she leaned over and whispered, "We make a beautiful kid, don't we?" I couldn't speak. My jaw was locked so tight I could hear my own teeth grinding. People in the community later told me times, "It seems to me that she's testing the waters." Be careful, my friend. Asterisk. I couldn't begin to understand why. She was happy as can be. Dating my former best friend had attempted to file an order of protection on me, and we were about to begin a family court battle that was already leaning toward me. What waters were left to test? Someone put it bluntly times, "Mate, you have to realize that nobody can understand crazy." We can try to find reasons for her behavior, but none would be good reasons. For me, it sounds like a crazy, entitled narcissist brat who doesn't care about what you feel. She wants to cheat, she cheats. She wants you gone, so she tries to get the restraining order. She wants to play with the kid, she will. She wants to talk to you, then she will talk to you. Asterisk. That's Megan. Chaos is currency, control is oxygen. The order of protection was denied. The court saw through it. Megan, perhaps sensing the ground shifting, offered joint custody, unprompted a move that reeked of strategy, not generosity. Her own family still wouldn't back her. The case leaned my way and everyone in town knew why. But here's what no one tells you about winning. August 19th came. Our wedding date. I spent it on my mother's porch, drinking a beer I couldn't taste, watching the sun go down over the same town where I'd proposed, where I'd held my son for the first time, where I'd asked my best friend to stand beside me at the altar. That evening, I drove to the grocery store and saw them in the parking lot. Megan, in the passenger seat of Tyler's truck, my son's car seat, visible in the back. The three of them pulling out of a spot, like any other family, on any other Tuesday. I sat in my truck until they were gone. My hands were steady, my chest was not. The wedding never happened. The friendship was ash. The woman I'd loved since I was 16 was living in the house of the man I trusted most. And my only victory, the only one that mattered, was this: I left. The truth was no longer hidden. And my son would grow up knowing that his father fought for him, not against the people who betrayed him, but times for him, asterisk. Every swallowed insult, every clenched jaw in a waiting room, every night I chose silence over rage. It was all for him. That's the part they don't put in the fairy tale. Sometimes the best man was never the best man. Sometimes the only way to protect your family is to watch it be stolen and prove day by day that you were the one worth keeping.
Story 6.
My husband probably told you his side of the story. I'm sure he made me sound like a monster, a cold-hearted snake who blew up our perfect life for no reason. I get it. From where he's standing, that's probably what it looks like. But lives aren't that simple, and a marriage doesn't just break overnight. It dies slowly. So slowly you don't even notice. Until you're sitting in the dark, wondering when the lights went out. He's a good man. I need to say that first. He's a wonderful father to our kids, and for a long time he was a good husband. He's dependable. If the car makes a weird noise, he knows how to fix it. If the budget is tight, he figures out a plan. He's a rock. But nobody tells you that you can be incredibly lonely even when you're leaning against a rock. You can be dying of thirst while it's raining all around you. For years, I felt like I was disappearing. I wasn't a person anymore. I was a collection of jobs. I was mom, the chauffeur, the cook, the laundry machine, the scheduler. I was wife. The co-signer, the social planner, the other half of a team that ran a household. Our conversations became like business meetings. We'd sit down after the kids were in bed, and he'd pull out his phone to look at the calendar. Okay, soccer practice is Thursday. You have the PTA meeting on Tuesday. I'll need to work late on Wednesday. Did you pay the electric bill? It was all logistics. There was no times us, times anymore. There was just the project of our family. I'd try sometimes. I'd put on a dress he used to like and ask how I looked. He'd glance up from his laptop and say, "Looks good," without ever really seeing me. I stopped trying. What was the point? I was just part of the background, part of the furniture. Useful, necessary, but completely invisible. I remember my friends, and I went on one of our yearly girls' weekends. We were all in our late 30s, drinking cheap wine in a rented cabin, and every single one of us had the same story. The slow fade. The feeling of becoming a ghost in your own life. We weren't bad people. We loved our kids. We even still loved our husbands in a way. We were just erased. They saw what was happening to me. My friend Sarah told me I'd lost my spark. She was right. I was just a pilot light, barely flickering. Then I met Frank. It was nothing dramatic. He was a dad from my son's baseball team. We'd just make small talk on the sidelines. But then he started to actually talk to me. He'd ask about my day, and he wouldn't accept fine as an answer. He'd say, "No, really." How was it? And he would listen. He remembered that I hated cilantro and that my favorite author was Stephen King. Tiny, stupid things that my husband had forgotten years ago. When Frank looked at me, he saw times me. Asterisk. Sue. Not the mom, not the wife. Just me. He thought I was funny. He told me I had a beautiful smile. It felt like coming up for air after being underwater for a decade. It started with coffees after we dropped the kids at school. Then it turned into texts during the day. Harmless stuff mostly. Jokes, links to articles, just connection. My friends knew. I told them everything. They were happy for me. I know how that sounds, but you have to understand. They saw it as me finding a little piece of myself again. You deserve to feel good, Sarah said. It's just a little fun. It's your secret. I believed her. I told myself it was just a fantasy, a little secret garden I could escape to when the real world felt too gray and suffocating. I never ever wanted to leave my husband or break up my family. I just wanted to feel alive. I thought I could keep these two worlds separate. I thought I was strong enough to build a wall between them. The wall came down so fast I didn't even know what hit me. The physical affair started a few months in. It was a mistake, a line I swore I'd never cross, but it felt inevitable. Being seen led to being touched, and I was so starved for affection that I just folded. We were careful. We met at a cheap hotel on the edge of town, one of those places you'd never go with your family. I told my husband I was meeting my friends for a movie night. It was the third or fourth time we'd done it. It was becoming a routine. A dirty, thrilling, shameful routine. Frank and I were supposed to meet there. I was running a little late, stuck in traffic, and I sent him a quick text. Be there in 10. Room 214. My heart was pounding the way it always did. A mix of guilt and excitement that made me feel sick and alive all at once. I parked my car, took a deep breath, and walked into the lobby. I felt a buzz from my phone and pulled it out. It was a text from my husband. My blood went cold. Funny. I'm here too. My company just booked me a room for the conference tomorrow. Small world. I'm in room 212. I stood there in the dingy hotel hallway, phone in my hand, and I couldn't breathe. The world tilted. Room 212. He was in room 212. My husband. Our room, the one I was supposed to be in with Frank, was 214. The universe had a sick sense of humor. For a second, my brain just short-circuited. I thought times. Maybe it's a coincidence. A crazy, impossible coincidence. Asterisk. Then the door to room 212 opened. It was him. My husband. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't crying. His face was just blank. It was a terrifying, cold emptiness I had never seen before. He looked right through me like I was a ghost. Then his eyes flicked to the door of room 214, which had just opened. Frank stepped out, looking confused. He saw my husband, then he saw me, and the color drained from his face. My husband didn't say a word to him. He just looked at me. Get your things, he said. His voice was flat. Dead. The kids are with my parents. We're done. He turned and walked back into his room, shutting the door with a soft click that sounded louder than a gunshot. The sound echoed in the hallway. I couldn't move. My legs wouldn't work. Frank looked at me, this man who had told me I was the most alive person he'd ever met. He didn't say, I'm so sorry. He didn't say, we'll figure this out. He just turned, walked past me down the hall without a single word, and disappeared around the corner. The man who had made me feel seen couldn't even look at me as he left me in the rubble of my own life. That's when I broke. The double abandonment, the cold fury of my husband, and the silent cowardice of my lover, it was too much. The floor came up to meet me. The world became a blur of ugly carpet patterns and the smell of stale cigarette smoke. The weight of what I had done, the family I had shattered, for a fantasy that wasn't even real, it crushed me. I don't remember much after that. I remember muffled voices. The feeling of being lifted, waking up in a hospital bed felt like a cruel joke. I had tried to escape a life that felt like a prison, and I'd ended up in a real one, locked inside my own head with nothing but my guilt. The doctors said I'd had a complete psychological breakdown. They gave it a fancy name, but all it meant was that my soul had given up. A few days later, a nurse told me my husband was coming to visit. Hope is a terrible, stupid thing. A tiny spark lit up in the darkness. Asterisk. Maybe he wants to understand. Maybe he sees how broken I am. Maybe we can fix this. Asterisk. They had me on medication that made everything feel fuzzy, but I tried to pull myself together. I rehearsed what I would say. I'd explain the loneliness, the invisibility. I'd tell him I never stopped loving him. They wheeled me in my chair into a small, sterile family conference room. He was there, sitting at a table with his father. He looked tired. He looked 10 years older. The moment I saw his face, all my prepared speeches, all my rational explanations, they just vanished. All I saw was my husband, my best friend, my home, and he looked so far away. Before anyone could say anything, I was out of that wheelchair. I didn't even register ripping the IV tape from my arm. It was like an animal instinct. I just had to get to him. I fell on the floor in front of him, my stupid hospital gown gaping at the back, and I grabbed onto his legs. I just held on, burying my face in his jeans, sobbing. It wasn't a plan. It was the only thing my body knew how to do, hold on to the one thing that had ever felt solid. I'm sorry, I cried over and over. Please, I'm so sorry. Please don't leave me. We can fix this. Please. He didn't move. He just looked down at me, and his voice was full of a pain so deep it scared me. Why? He asked. Why do you hate me so much? Why do you hate our family? He didn't see a broken woman begging for forgiveness. He saw an enemy, a monster. And that's when I knew. I hadn't just broken his heart. I had destroyed his entire picture of me, of us. I had become something unrecognizable to him. As I looked up at him pleading, I saw his face twist. A bright red spot bloomed in the white of his left eye. Then blood started pouring from his nose. Not a trickle. A gush. His father shouted his name. Nurses rushed in. It was chaos. All I could see was the blood. His blood. It was like all the pain I had caused him on the inside was finally bursting out. He was literally breaking because of me. They rushed him out of the room, and I just collapsed a puddle of shame on the cold linoleum floor. I had not only destroyed our marriage, I had physically hurt the man I still loved more than anything. After that, we didn't talk. We texted. It felt safer, I guess. Less chance of anyone bleeding. A few weeks later, after I was released, I sat down one night and couldn't stop thinking about all the things we needed to fix. All the things that had gone wrong. I started typing them into my phone. I didn't even realize what I was doing until I was done. There were 136 of them. A list of everything from relearn how to talk about our feelings, to go on a date once a week, to couples therapy. I sent it to him. Not as a list of demands. It was a desperate prayer. It was me tearing open my chest and showing him everything inside, every thought, every hope, every ounce of effort I was willing to put in. It was me screaming times, "Look, I'm still here. I still want to fight for this. Please, just pick one. Pick anything and let's start there." Asterisk. He texted back a few hours later. "This is too much. It feels like an ultimatum." And that's where we are now. Trapped in two different realities. I send him my shattered heart and he sees it as a weapon. I tell him I'm struggling, that I'm fragile, and he hears it as emotional blackmail. He wants to talk about lawyers and splitting assets, about logistics. But I can't. I need to talk about us. Because if we can't even agree on the language of our own pain, then there really will be nothing left to say.
Story 7.
I know what he's telling everyone. I'm the monster. I'm the fiancé who cheated on the sweet, depressed guy who only ever wanted to love me. It's a simple story, and it makes me the perfect villain. But the truth is, our story was never simple. It was a mess from the very beginning. When I met him, it felt like finding the other half of a shipwreck. I was running from a man who had controlled my every word, my every friendship, my every dollar for years. I was a ghost. My ex had hollowed me out, and I was just trying to remember what it felt like to be a real person. He, my fiancé, was reeling from his own kind of loss, a deep sadness that clung to him like a wet coat. We didn't fall in love. We found each other in the dark and held on because we were both terrified of being alone. We were clinging to each other for warmth, two broken people trying to make a whole. Early on, he suggested we be polyamorous. He said it was for me, so I could experiment and find myself after everything I'd been through. I see now that it was really for both of us. It was our way of admitting that we were too damaged for a real all-in commitment. It was a safety net. I thought it was my chance to feel like my own person again, to feel desired without the weight of someone's entire world on my shoulders. So I tried. I met up with his old friend a few times. It was nice. He was funny. And he looked at me like I was just a woman, not a charity case or a rescue project. And yes, we slept together. We had rules, we were open about it, and it was all supposed to be fine. But when I actually used the freedom he'd given me, something in him just broke. He never took the opportunities he had to see other people, which just made me feel worse, like I was the only one taking advantage of our arrangement. Then the panic attacks started. I was already struggling to keep my own depression from swallowing me whole, and suddenly I was responsible for his too. It became my job to talk him down, to breathe with him, to make sure he was okay. One night it all blew up. We were at his friend's house, the same friend I'd been seeing, and he had a full-blown panic attack right there in the living room. It was awful. The whole night became about him, his breathing, his terror. And I felt this horrible wave of shame, like I had caused it. Like my tiny piece of freedom, the one thing I was doing for myself was destroying him. It felt like I had traded one cage for another. This one wasn't made of anger and control, but of his sorrow and anxiety. Honestly, I don't know which is worse. I had to leave. I broke up with him because I couldn't breathe. The weight of his mental health on top of mine was crushing me. But being alone was terrifying. The world felt loud and sharp and hostile. All the ghosts from my past relationship came back, and I felt that same old fear creeping in. So I went back to him. I was the one who proposed. I know how crazy that sounds, but I wanted the dream. I wanted a white dress and a promise and a future that looked stable. I thought if we just had the official piece of paper, the ring, the titles of husband and wife, we could build a normal life. I thought a promise could fix us. Fix me. We agreed to be monogamous. The polyamory experiment was over. We were going to be a real couple. For a few months, it actually worked. It felt wholesome. We were planning a wedding, talking about the future. I let myself believe it was real. Then came the fight. We were at a family dinner, and his sister got drunk. She started laying into me, asking all these pointed, nasty questions about my past, about the polyamory, making little jabs about me not being good enough for him. And he just sat there. He didn't say a word. He didn't defend me. He just stared at his plate and let her tear me apart. In that moment, I felt a loneliness so deep it hurt to breathe. It was that old familiar feeling of being completely and utterly alone, even when the person who is supposed to love you is sitting right next to you. I left. I drove straight to his friend's place. I wasn't planning for anything to happen. I just needed to talk to someone who saw me as a person, not a project he had to manage, or a problem his family had to approve of. We sat and talked for hours. He listened. He didn't judge me. He made me feel seen. And it happened. It was a stupid, terrible mistake, born from feeling completely abandoned. It was a self-destruct button, and I pushed it. The guilt was instant and suffocating. I knew I had broken our new promise, the most important one we had ever made. A few days later, he knew something was wrong. He asked me if I'd seen his friend. I couldn't just drop the whole horrible truth on him at once. I looked at him, and all I could see was how fragile he was. I was terrified the truth would break him completely and break us along with him. So I lied. Or I didn't tell the whole truth. I tried to protect him. I told him we touched. A few weeks later, when he was stronger, I admitted we kissed. I was trying to meter out the pain to give it to him in pieces I thought he could handle. It wasn't a lie to be cruel or to get away with it. It was a panicked, flawed, stupid attempt to keep our world from shattering into a million pieces. Eventually, months later, I told him everything. The whole story. It was the hardest conversation of my life. He cried. I cried. It was a nightmare. But after the dust settled, we decided to try. We were in therapy, both of us. We were talking more than we ever had. It was raw and painful, but for the first time it felt like we were actually fighting for a real future. I really believed we were slowly, painstakingly healing. I thought the worst was finally behind us. Then my phone blew up. I was at work, and it started buzzing and didn't stop. A flood of notifications from our group chat. At first I was just annoyed, but then I saw the previews. My name? His name? Snippets of words like cheated and lied. My heart dropped. I opened the chat, and there it was. He had taken screenshots of our most private conversations from the past few months. My agonizing piecemeal confession. His heartbroken replies. My pleas for forgiveness. And he had added his own commentary, his own notes narrating my betrayal for an audience. He had sent it all to a group chat with a dozen of our closest friends. My whole body went cold. I couldn't breathe. I ran to the bathroom and locked myself in a stall, shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone. He took my absolute worst moment, the mistake I was most ashamed of, the secret pain we were supposed to be healing together, and he made it public knowledge. He turned my private failing into public entertainment. When I finally got him on the phone, he was sobbing. He claimed it was an accident. He said he was trying to send it to his sister to vent and he clicked the wrong chat. An accident. Does it even? Does it matter if he tripped and pushed me off a cliff? Or if he pushed me on purpose, I was still falling. He humiliated me in front of our entire social circle with the tap of a screen. He talks about betrayal, I get it. I broke our promise. I slept with someone else. I betrayed our engagement with one person in a moment of utter weakness and loneliness, but I confessed it to him times privately. I was willing to do the ugly, painful work of fixing what I had broken. What he did was different. He betrayed my entire existence. He took my trust in our shared history and detonated it in a public square for everyone to see. He held up my shame like a trophy. The aftermath was exactly what you'd expect. The silence from our friends was deafening. The few who did reach out sent me these cautious, pitying messages, asking if I was okay, but not really wanting to hear it. They had already picked a side. How could they not? He had the receipts. He had screenshots. He had curated a perfect narrative where he was the sympathetic victim and I was the cold, calculating monster. He handed them a simple story and they took it. I was radioactive. People we'd known for years looked at me with different eyes. I wasn't a person anymore. I was a cautionary tale. We tried to talk. I went over to our apartment to get my things, and he was just broken. He kept saying he was sorry, that he never meant for it to happen. But in the next breath, he'd accuse me of not understanding his pain. He wanted me to comfort him for the public humiliation that he had caused. He couldn't see past his own hurt to understand what he had done to me. He exposed me, and then he demanded I help him clean up the mess. It's not even over. He still won't let it go. He's been contacting the friend I slept with, demanding the truth. He's asking for details, a timeline, as if my own gut-wrenching confession wasn't good enough. It's not about truth anymore. It's about control. He's gathering more evidence, looking for more details to paint me as an even bigger villain. He can't accept my version where I was a flawed, broken person who made a terrible mistake. He needs the version where I'm purely evil, because that makes him purely good. It makes him the hero of the story. I left an abuser who controlled my life with anger and threats. I thought I had escaped that. I thought I'd found someone gentle, someone who understood pain. But I just ended up with someone who uses his pain as a weapon. He found a different way to control me. Instead of telling me who I could see or what I could wear, he controlled how everyone saw me. He took my worst mistake and used it to brand me, to isolate me, to make sure I'd be alone again. He knew my deepest fear was not being safe, of having my life exposed and picked apart. And that's exactly what he did. He made sure that even if I left him, I'd be leaving with nothing and no one. So yes, I cheated. I own that. It was wrong, and I will carry the shame of it for a long, long time. But his betrayal was worse. I broke a promise between two people. He broke a person. And he did it in front of everyone we knew.
Story 8.
I know what people think of me. I'm the ex-girlfriend from his story. The rich girl who couldn't handle a joke, who chose her spoiled family over the brilliant, struggling artist. I've seen the comments online. I've heard the whispers. It's a simple story, and I'm the perfect villain for it. But it wasn't simple. It was the slow, painful death of something I thought was real. When I met him, my life felt like it was finally in color. I work in marketing, a job my parents were proud of. My friends were all getting engaged to guys who worked in finance or were finishing up law school. Everything was stable and predictable and beige. Then he came along. He was electric. He could walk into a room and just own it with a few words. He was funny, of course, but he was also smart and passionate, and saw the world in a way I never had. He made me feel like I was seeing it that way too. But our lives were like two different languages, and I was the only one trying to be the translator. When my colleagues at work would ask about my boyfriend, I'd get this knot in my stomach. He's a writer and a performer, I'd say, which was true. But it felt like a lie of omission. I was sanding down the edges of his life to make it fit into the neat little boxes of mine. I didn't say. He works a bar job 3 nights a week to pay rent on his tiny apartment, and spends every other waking moment trying to make strangers laugh so he doesn't have to. I was ashamed of myself for doing it, for caring what a bunch of people in business casual thought. But I was also terrified of their judgment, of that polite but condescending little smile they'd give me. He felt the gap between our worlds too, but for him it wasn't a gap. It was a canyon he stood on one side of, yelling across at me. It came out in little ways. A comment about the absurd price of a bottle of wine my dad brought to dinner. A jab about how I'd never had to worry about a car breaking down. He called it his inferiority complex, but it felt more like resentment. It was a quiet poison that seeped into our relationship. I tried so hard to prove it didn't matter. I paid for dates. I never bragged about trips. I tried to make myself smaller so he could feel bigger. That's why I insisted my sister come to his big show. My little sister Chloe is a lot. She's 21 inches, that sorority bubble where the world revolves around formals and brunch. She's been given everything, and she doesn't always see past the end of her own nose. But she's my sister, and I love her. When I told him I was bringing her and a few of her friends, he got this look on his face. He said he was concerned they'd be disruptive. But what I heard was, I don't want your kind of people in my world. I pushed back. I needed this. I needed to prove to him and maybe to myself that my two worlds could exist in the same room. I imagined Chloe laughing, finally getting what I saw in him, seeing the brilliant man I loved, instead of the guy with no 401k. I thought if they could just see him on that stage, they'd understand. I was so desperate to build a bridge over that canyon. I had no idea he was about to blow it up with dynamite. The night of the show, I felt like I was going to be sick. The club was packed. This was a huge deal for him, a showcase that could lead to bigger things. Chloe and her friends showed up late already, a little drunk and loud. During the opening act, they started whispering about the comedian's outfit. I felt a hot wave of shame wash over me. I shushed them, but it was like trying to herd cats. He was standing in the wings and he shot me a look. It wasn't an angry look. It was worse. It was a look that said, "I told you so." Then it was his turn. He walked on stage, and for the first 10 minutes, he was magic. The crowd was roaring. I felt my shoulders relax. I looked over at Chloe, and she was actually laughing. For a second, I let myself believe it was going to be okay. Then he started a new bit. One I hadn't heard before, about how people who wear North Face jackets in the city are basically admitting they have no personality. I saw Chloe and her friend, both wearing black North Face jackets, glance at each other. They started talking. It wasn't mean or malicious, just the self-absorbed chatter of drunk 1-year-olds who think they're in their own living room. But in a silent comedy club, it was like a siren. He stopped mid-sentence. The silence was deafening. He looked right at our table. "Everything okay over there? Am I interrupting your book club?" My blood ran cold. The spotlight wasn't on him anymore. It felt like it was on me. He looked at me, a flicker in his eyes, waiting for me to handle it. He wanted me to be his bouncer. But what was I supposed to do? Stand up and scream at my own sister in a room full of people, drag her out by her hair? I just froze, trapped between my loyalty to him and my loyalty to my family. And then Chloe, in a moment of drunken stupidity, slurred something back at him. I couldn't hear it clearly, but I heard the words, "Your mom!" His entire demeanor changed. The charming comedian vanished, and someone cold and cruel took his place. "Oh, we're talking about moms now," he said into the mic. He pointed at Chloe. "You see this. This is what happens when your dad pays your rent for so long, you forget how to act in public. This is a petulant rich girl in her natural habitat." The words hit me like a slap. Asterisk, rich girl, asterisk. It was the same venom he'd use in private, but now he was putting it on display for everyone. He wasn't just shutting down a heckler. He was attacking my family. He was attacking me. The crowd was eating it up. He paused for effect, letting the laughter build. Then he leaned into the mic and delivered the killing blow. "Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Cunt Drunkula." The room exploded. It was the biggest laugh of the night. People were howling, slapping their knees. And I just sat there, my heart pounding in my ears, watching the man I loved use the ugliest word he could think of to humiliate my sister for sport. They weren't just laughing at her. They were laughing at my world. And he was the one conducting the orchestra. The rest of the night was a blur of tears. Chloe was a wreck. We got into a cab and she sobbed the whole way home. My phone started blowing up with texts from my parents. My mom was trying to get the story, and my dad was just sending me messages in all caps, furious. He's the calmest man I know, but all he understood was that the man I brought into our family had publicly called his youngest daughter that word. I finally got home. My dad was pacing in the living room. "Where does he live?" he asked, his voice dangerously low. I tried to calm him down to tell him I would handle it, but he wasn't listening. He just kept saying, "A man doesn't do that. A man doesn't ever do that." I begged him not to go, not to make it worse, but he just grabbed his car keys and walked out the door. A half hour later, my phone rang. It was him. He wasn't yelling. He just sounded scared. "Sarah?" he said, his voice tight. "Your dad is at my apartment." I dropped the phone and grabbed my keys, my hands shaking so hard I could barely get them in the ignition. My dad, the man who mediates business disputes worth millions without raising his voice, was at my comedian boyfriend's rundown apartment in a bad part of town. This wasn't just a fight anymore. This was a collision. The whole drive over, I kept picturing it. My dad in his perfectly tailored suit standing in that tiny living room with the second-hand couch and the poster held up with thumbtacks. The two men who represented the two halves of my life, ready to tear each other apart. When I got there, the door was open a crack. I pushed it open, and the scene was exactly as I'd imagined, only worse. My dad wasn't yelling. He was just standing there radiating a kind of cold, quiet anger that was so much scarier than shouting. He looked at my boyfriend, who was backed up against his own small kitchen counter, and said, "I don't care what she did. You don't get to use that word on my daughter. Not on my daughter. Not ever." He looked trapped, cornered. He saw me in the doorway, and his eyes were wide with a mix of fear and anger. "Sarah, tell your dad to get out of my apartment." "Dad, please," I begged, my voice cracking. "Let's just go. This isn't helping." My dad didn't even look at me. He kept his eyes locked on him. "You're going to apologize to her. Face to face." She heckled me during the most important set of my life. He shot back, his voice finally rising. "What was I supposed to do?" "You were supposed to be a man, my dad," said the words, cutting through the air. "Not a coward who hides behind a microphone." I stepped between them then. I put my hand on my dad's chest. "Dad, please. For me, let's go. We'll sort this out later." For a second, I thought he was going to refuse, but he looked down at me, saw the tears in my eyes, and something in him broke. He gave my boyfriend one last look of pure disgust and walked out. I followed him, not daring to look back. The next couple of days were hell. My dad insisted on a formal meeting. A sit-down. It sounded like a mob movie. I was still clinging to this tiny, stupid sliver of hope that we could fix it. I thought if he could just see how hurt Chloe was, if he could just say the right words, we could rewind. We could go back to before he called her that name. He agreed to the meeting, but his tone was all wrong. He framed it as a professional necessity. "I can't have your dad thinking I'm some monster," he'd said. "It's bad for my image." It was about him. It was always about him. We met at a neutral, sterile restaurant halfway between our two worlds. The four of us slid into a booth, and the silence was so heavy I could barely breathe. Chloe was sitting next to my dad, looking small, and she wouldn't make eye contact with anyone. My dad looked like he was ready for war. And my boyfriend, he looked like a kid who'd been called to the principal's office. After the waitress left, he cleared his throat and started. "Look, Chloe," he said, his eyes on the table. "I'm sorry your feelings got hurt." I felt my dad tense up next to me. He kept going. Asterisk. "But times you can't just yell things at a comedian in the middle of a set. You interrupted my show. I have a right to defend my stage." He was putting the blame on her. I couldn't believe it. He was actually sitting here lecturing my humiliated 1-year-old sister about comedy club etiquette. My dad leaned forward. "We're not talking about your stage. We're talking about the word you used. Do you think that was appropriate?" "It's a comedy club, not a church," he snapped back. "Words are just words." It got a laugh. It got a laugh. My dad repeated, his voice dangerously low. "You think that makes it okay? You humiliated her for a laugh." He looked at me then, his eyes pleading. He was looking for his backup, for the translator, for the bridge. He expected me to jump in and defend his art, his process, his world. But I wasn't looking at him. I was looking at my sister, who had started to quietly cry. I was looking at my dad, who was defending our family. And in that moment, the choice wasn't even a choice. I turned to him, and my voice was quiet, but it felt like the loudest sound in the world. "Yeah," I said, "you didn't have to be that rude." The look on his face was like I'd stabbed him. Betrayal. He just stared at me as I put my arm around my sister. The bridge wasn't just burned. was gone. There was nothing left but that canyon between us. We went back to his apartment. We both knew it was over. The silence was different this time. It wasn't angry. It was just dead. He was pacing back and forth in the small space. Finally, he stopped and looked at me. So that's it. I embarrass you. The question hung in the air. For so long, I had been embarrassed by the wrong things. I was embarrassed to tell my friends he worked in a bar. I was embarrassed when my parents asked about his savings. I was embarrassed by our differences. But I was wrong. Yes, I said, and the honesty of it was both painful and liberating. You do embarrass me. But not for the reasons you think. I was never embarrassed by your job or your apartment, or that you don't have a trust fund. I was proud of you. I was proud of how hard you worked for this. I took a breath. I'm embarrassed by your bitterness. I'm embarrassed that you look at me and my family and you don't see people. You just see a stereotype. You see petulant rich girls. You see a punching bag for your act. You used my sister's mistake to prove a point you've been trying to make our entire relationship. That you're better than us, more authentic, more real because you've struggled. He didn't say anything. He just stood there and I could see the walls going up. You think you made a choice on that stage between your career and some heckler? I finished, my voice shaking. But that's not what happened. You chose your resentment over me. And I can't live with that. I can't be the person you secretly hate. He finally nodded a slow, resigned movement. I gathered my purse and walked to the door. For a second I thought he might say something, ask me to stay, apologize for real. He didn't. I walked out and closed the door on his world for the last time. In his story, he's the hero who refused to sell out for his rich girlfriend. But the truth is, I never asked him to change who he was. I just asked him to let me and the people I love in. He was the one who couldn't. He was so busy fighting a class war in his head that he didn't realize the only person he was really fighting against was himself. I chose my family, it's true. But I didn't choose them over him. I chose security. Not financial security, but the security of being loved by people who don't see you as a symbol of everything they hate.
Story 9.
They're calling me the Queen Bee, the mastermind, the one who broke up all our homes. I see the comments online, the whispers in the grocery store. They paint me as some kind of monster, a bored housewife who decided to play with people's lives for fun. But they don't know the truth. They don't know what it felt like to be slowly suffocating. When my husband and I moved back to our hometown 4 years ago, everyone thought it was perfect. A big house close to our parents, a great place to raise the kids. But for me, it felt like a cage. My husband Mark is a good man. He provides, he doesn't yell, he's a decent dad. But our life was a flat line. Every morning was the same coffee, the same small talk. Every night was the same TV shows, the same tired kiss on the cheek before he rolled over and started snoring. I wasn't a person. I was a function. A cook, a cleaner, a driver. I was background noise in my own life. Then about 6 months after we moved back, I ran into my old high school boyfriend at the post office. We got coffee just to catch up, and it was like a light switched on inside me. He saw times me, asterisk. Not Mark's wife, not the kid's mom. Just Betty. The conversation was easy, we laughed, and for the first time in years, I felt interesting. It started small. Lunches. Then the lunches got longer. One day he told me about a new spa hotel that opened up an hour away. He said we could just get a day pass, use the pool. It was innocent, but we both knew it wasn't. That day was the first time I felt like I could breathe in years. Nothing major happened, but the thrill of the secret of having something that was just mine was intoxicating. It became our thing. A stolen afternoon here, a secret dinner there. The crazy thing was, it made my life at home better. I stopped being so resentful of Mark. I had more patience with the kids. I was happy because I had a little piece of my life that was just for me. It was a fantasy, a release valve that let all the pressure out, so I didn't explode. I wasn't going to leave my husband. I loved my family. This was just maintenance, a way to keep the engine running. I started to notice the same look in my friend's eyes. That hollowed-out expression you get when your entire identity has been swallowed up by your family. I saw it most in Sue. She looked constantly exhausted, one step away from just sitting down in the middle of the floor and crying. We were all in the same boat. So, one night, after a couple of glasses of wine, I told them my secret. Not all the details, but the general idea. I told them I had a way to feel like myself again. I explained that it wasn't about hurting our husbands or destroying our families. It was about self-preservation. It was a way to find a little bit of happiness, so we could bring that happiness back home. I thought I was giving them a gift, a key, to unlock their own cages. A few of the girls got it immediately. They understood it was about a feeling, not about a man. Soon it became our secret club. We'd cover for each other. Oh, she's with me at the mall. We shared stories not in a gossipy way, but like we were sharing battle plans for our own survival. It worked. We were all better for it. When Sue told me she'd started seeing Frank, a guy she knew from work, I was thrilled for her. She was smiling again. She had a spark back in her eyes. I thought finally she gets it. She's taking something for herself. My only rule, the one I repeated over and over, was, be smart. Don't get emotional. Don't get sloppy. This isn't a fairy tale romance. It's a tool. You use it carefully and you put it away when you're done. But Sue got sloppy. Frank was a terrible choice. He was connected to our social circle. Too many people knew him. And then she did the dumbest thing imaginable. She got a hotel room in our city, not an hour away. 10 minutes from her own house. It was reckless. It was amateur. A phone call came from another friend in our group. Her voice was shaking. Sue's husband found them. He burst into the room. My first feeling wasn't sympathy. It was white-hot anger. She broke the code. She put us all at risk because she couldn't keep her head on straight. I later found out he caught them before anything had even really happened. They were just talking, maybe a few kisses. And for that, she let him blow up the world. Then came the news about the hospital. A complete mental breakdown. It was all so dramatic, so over the top. Instead of managing the situation, owning her mistake, and controlling the damage, she just fell apart. She let the guilt turn her into a victim, a damsel in distress, who needed her husband to rescue her from a mess she made herself. When she got out, she wasn't the same. It was like her husband had spent her entire hospital stay reprogramming her. She wasn't our Sue anymore. She was his soldier. I got another panicked call. She's going to tell them. She's going to tell all the husbands everything. I drove straight to her house. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely grip the steering wheel. This wasn't about honesty. This was revenge. She was ashamed of what she did, and she wanted to make sure we were all just as miserable as she was. I found her in the kitchen packing a box with Frank's old gifts. She looked pale, but her eyes were hard. "Sue, don't do this," I said. My voice was calm, reasonable. I wasn't there to yell. I was there to talk her down. "You made a mistake. A small one. You don't have to burn down the whole village to put out the fire in your own house." She just stared at me. "Tell your husband what you need to," I said, leaning forward. "But tell my husband a light version. Just say we went out for drinks sometimes, that we complained about our marriages. You don't have to destroy my family to save your own. That's not what friends do. We protect each other." From the corner of my eye, I could see her husband's shadow in the hallway. He was listening to every word. Sue looked at me, then looked towards the shadow, and a decision settled on her face. "No, Betty," she said, her voice flat. "He deserves to know the whole truth. They all do. She chose him. She threw all of us into the fire to prove her loyalty to the man she had just betrayed. I walked out of that house knowing my life was over. She wasn't just a friend who got caught. She was an informant. I've been waiting for 2 days. Every time the phone rings, my heart stops. Every time I see Mark's car headlights sweep across the living room window, I feel sick. He just got home from work. I can hear his keys jangling as he puts them in the little bowl by the door. He's walking down the hall now. He stopped outside the kitchen. He knows. He must know. He stepped into the kitchen, not looking at me, but at the counter. A kid's drawing stuck to the fridge, the grocery list I'd written that morning. His movements were slow, deliberate. He took off his watch and placed it by the sink. It was the same thing he did every single night, and the routine of it felt like a punch to the gut. "Sue's husband called me at work today," he said. His voice was completely flat. No anger, no emotion, just a statement of fact. It was so much worse than yelling. He told me quite a story, Betty. I opened my mouth to say something, anything. To spin it, to soften it, to manage it. But what could I say? I'd already rehearsed the light version in my head 100 times, But Sue had taken that option away from me. "Mark, we need to talk," I started, my own voice sounding weak and pathetic. "No," he said, finally turning to look at me. His eyes were empty. I had spent years feeling invisible, and now being truly seen by him was terrifying. "There's nothing to talk about." He told me everything. He had names, places. For 4 years. He shook his head, a small, tired movement. 4 years you've been living this other life while I was? What, paying the mortgage, coaching Little League? It wasn't like that, I pleaded. It didn't mean anything. It was just something for me. I was so unhappy, Mark. I felt like I was disappearing. For the first time, a flicker of something crossed his face. It was a raw, wounded anger. "You were unhappy. You felt like you were disappearing. Did you ever think to tell me that? Did you ever once come to me and say, 'Mark, I feel lonely'? Or was it just easier to go find some ghost from high school to make you feel special?" He knew the name. Of course he knew the name. Sue had given him a full manifest of our sins. She'd left nothing out. This house, the kids, our life. "You thought it was boring?" He continued, his voice getting a little louder now. "I thought it was what we wanted. I thought we were a team. I come home every day to this. To you. And all this time you were coming home from..." "Where?" "A spa hotel." He said the words "spa hotel" like they were poison. "Was it fun? Did you have a good time laughing about your boring husband with your fun friends?" The words hit me harder than a slap. He was twisting it, making it sound sordid and cheap. He couldn't understand. "You don't get it," I shot back, the frustration boiling over. "I was drowning, and this was a life raft. It made me a better mother, a better wife. I was happy when I came home." "A better wife." He let out a short, bitter laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "You were a liar. A great liar, I'll give you that. For 4 years. That's not a better wife, Betty. That's a better actress." He walked over to the kitchen table and sat down heavily in one of the chairs. He looked old. He looked like a stranger. "I called a lawyer on my way home," he said quietly. "He's drawing up the papers. I want you to pack a bag. I'll stay at my brother's for a few days to give you time to figure out where you're going. I don't want the kids to see this." The finality of it stole the air from my lungs. "Mark, no. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. Don't throw away our entire life because of a mistake." A mistake. He stood up, and now the anger was fully there, his face red. "A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk. A mistake is bouncing a check. What you did, what you all did, was a conspiracy. You built a whole secret society based on lies and betrayal. And you were the queen? That's what he called you. The queen bee." There it was. The brand Sue had seared onto my forehead. I couldn't defend myself against it. To him, I wasn't his wife anymore. I was a cartoon villain. I was the mastermind who ruined everyone's lives. He walked past me and went upstairs. I stood alone in the kitchen, listening to the sounds of him opening drawers, the rustle of clothes. He was packing. Not me. He was leaving tonight. The house was suddenly huge and silent. The life I had resented for being so predictable was gone, and all I felt was a terrifying cold emptiness. I packed a small overnight bag in a daze. I didn't cry. I felt numb, like I was watching a movie about someone else. As I was walking out the door, my phone buzzed. It was a text from one of the other girls, Karen. Asterisk. My husband knows. He's kicking me out. This is all your fault. Asterisk. Another one came in right after from Lisa. Asterisk. Sue is a traitor and you are a fool. You ruined us. Asterisk. The club was officially disbanded. The women I had tried to liberate were now just a firing squad, and I was their only target. I drove to the only place I could think of, a cheap motel off the highway with a flickering neon sign. The room smelled like stale smoke and sadness. I sat on the edge of the stiff bed, the ugly floral bedspread scratching my legs. This was my new freedom. Not a spa day and a long lunch, but a lonely room with thin walls and a view of a parking lot. I thought I was being smart. I thought I had found a way to have it all, to balance the suffocating reality with a little bit of fantasy. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I was just trying to survive. My only real mistake was trusting someone as weak as Sue. She couldn't handle the pressure. When her little fantasy world blew up, she decided to take a torch to everyone else's. She confessed to save her own marriage, to cleanse her own guilt, and she sacrificed 3 other families to do it. People will say I got what I deserved. That my husband was right to leave me, that my friends are right to blame me. Maybe they are. But as I sit here in the buzzing silence of this awful room, I can't help but think that I didn't ask for this. I just wanted to breathe. I opened a window for a little fresh air. And Sue decided to burn the whole house to the ground with all of us still inside. She didn't just get caught. She took a plea deal and turned state's evidence on the rest of us. And now I'm here, free from my cage at last, with absolutely nothing left.
Story teen.
I know what you think of me. My daughter Chloe has probably told you the whole story, and she's probably made me sound like the worst person in the world. And maybe I am. But you've only heard her side. You haven't heard what it's like to live in this house, this perfect, stable house that's built on a foundation of lies. They call us stable now. That's the word everyone uses. Oh, you two have done so well to get through it. You're so stable. It makes me want to laugh or maybe throw something. Stable is just another word for quiet. It's the quiet you get after a bomb goes off and you're just sitting in the rubble, too stunned to move. The bomb went off 2 years ago. My husband, Mark, the man everyone thinks is a saint for working so hard, sat me down and told me he had a secret. I thought it was another woman. I almost wished it was. It would have been simpler. No, he told me he'd gambled away our savings, our future, everything we had worked for. 100,000 pounds. Just gone. Poof. Like it was never there. The shock was so total I couldn't even cry at first. It was just this cold, heavy weight in my stomach. But the world doesn't stop for your pain. We had to tell the kids. We had to tell our families. And that's when the story changed. It wasn't about what he did to us anymore. It became the story of Mark's redemption. Everyone rallied around Times him, asterisk. His parents, my parents, our friends. He's a good man who made a mistake. He's so brave for admitting it. You have to support him. He's trying so hard to fix it. And what was I supposed to do? I was the wife. My job was to smile, nod, and be the supportive rock while he climbed out of the hole he'd thrown us all into. So I did. I played my part. But forgiveness isn't a switch you can just flip. Forgiveness became my prison. Every time he came home late from his second job, exhausted, and someone would say how amazing he was for working to pay it all back, something inside me would just shrivel up and die. He was being praised for cleaning up a mess Times he made, asterisk. He got to be the hero of his own story. I just got to live with the consequences, the constant fear about money, the shame. I got to be a supporting character in the grand drama of his recovery. My own mother died last year. The grief was a physical thing. It felt like I couldn't breathe. But in this house, there was only room for one person's suffering, and Mark was still taking up all the space. His guilt was louder than my grief. So I packed my sadness away, just like I packed away my anger. That's when the drinking got worse. A glass of wine with dinner turned into 2, then 3. It was the only thing that could blur the edges of my life. It turned down the volume on the silence in our house. Mark and I didn't talk anymore. Not really. We'd talk about bills, about Chloe, about what to have for dinner. But the laughter was gone. The easy comfort was gone. He'd walk into a room and all the air would just get sucked out. The wine helped me pretend I couldn't feel it. And then someone else started talking to me. It started innocently. Just a few texts from an old colleague I ran into. He was funny. He asked about my day. He didn't know me as Mark's wife, the poor woman whose husband gambled their life away. He didn't see the tired, resentful woman I saw in the mirror. He just saw me. He told me I was beautiful. He said I was sexy. He sent pictures and asked for them back. It was all a fantasy, I knew that. It wasn't love. It was just light. A tiny secret flicker of light in a very dark room. My phone became my escape. It was the one place in the world that was only mine where someone desired me instead of pitying me. Tonight, the wine was doing its job perfectly. I was on the sofa, feeling warm and floaty, smiling at a stupid joke he'd sent me. I was in my little secret world, a world where I wasn't a failure or a victim. I felt a shadow pass over me and looked up. It was Chloe. She was standing in the doorway to the kitchen just watching me. She's been looking at me like that for months. Like I'm a puzzle she can't solve, or maybe one she's already figured out and doesn't like the answer to. I saw the disgust on her face before she could hide it. I instinctively angled my phone away from her, my heart thumping. It felt like an invasion. Her judgment was a physical thing pushing into my private space. She didn't move. She just stood there, her arms crossed. "Who are you always texting?" she asked. Her voice was flat in accusation. My brain went completely blank. Panic, hot and sharp, shot through me. "No one," I said too quickly. "Just my therapist." A clumsy, stupid lie. I don't even have a therapist. She just stared at me, her eyes narrowed. She knew I was lying. She took a step closer. "Let me see then." "No," I said, my voice shaking. "It's private, Chloe. Get off my back." I tried to sound angry, but it came out as desperate. I clutched the phone tighter. This was mine. He had taken our money, our future. She wasn't going to take this from me, too. And then she did it. She moved so fast I didn't have time to react. She lunged forward and snatched the phone right out of my hands. A switch flipped. I saw red. It was a purely animal instinct. I scrambled off the sofa, grabbing for her arm for the phone. "Give it back," I yelled, my voice ragged. "Give it back to me right now." We stumbled a clumsy, ugly dance in the middle of the living room. I wasn't trying to hurt her. I was just trying to get my lifeline back. To protect the one small, selfish thing that made me feel alive. She was stronger. She shoved me back and I tripped over the rug, catching myself on the armchair. She stood there, panting, phone in her hand. Her back was to me. I was frozen, my breath caught in my throat, watching the straight, unforgiving line of her shoulders. I waited for her to turn around to scream at me. But she didn't. She just lifted the phone, her thumb moving across the screen that was still lit up from my last message. I saw her sharp intake of breath. Her whole body went rigid. I couldn't see her face, but I didn't need to. I knew in that gut-wrenching, world-ending moment that she was seeing it all. The texts, the names he called me, the photos. My secret was no longer mine. The silence in the room was so loud it felt like my ears were ringing. It couldn't have been more than a few seconds, but it stretched on forever. I watched her shoulders, how they shook just once. Then she slowly turned around. The look on her face, it wasn't just anger. It was disgust. It was the same look I'd seen her give Mark just once, right after he told us about the gambling. A look that said times, "I don't even know who you are anymore." Asterisk. "Mom." Her voice was a whisper. It cracked. "What is this? Who is this?" She held the phone out, like it was a dead thing she'd found. I couldn't speak. The whine, the panic, the shame, it was all a thick sludge in my throat. I just stared at her, my mind screaming for the right words, but nothing came out. And then the performance started. Her face crumpled. A huge theatrical sob ripped out of her, the kind that's meant to be heard. She clutched her stomach as if she'd been physically wounded. "How could you?" she wailed, her voice rising with every word. "How could you do this to Dad? After everything times he's done to fix this family. She was choosing a side. Right there in that moment. She wasn't my daughter horrified for her mother. She was his defender accusing me. And something inside me, something that had been quietly rotting for 2 years, finally snapped. Him, I practically spat the word. You're worried about times him, asterisk. He's been killing himself, working 2 jobs for us, she screamed back, tears streaming down her face. To pay back the money times lost, I screamed right back, finally finding my voice. It was raw, ugly. The money he stole from us, from you and me? Don't you dare stand there and act like he's a saint? She just shook her head, sobbing, looking at me like I was a monster. She didn't hear a word I said. She didn't want to. It was easier to have one good guy and one bad guy. And I just made it very easy for her to decide who was who. She turned and ran out of the living room. Not to her bedroom. No, she ran straight to the study where Mark was on his laptop, probably working through the accounts playing the martyr. I heard her burst in, heard her choked sobs. Dad, you have to see this. That was it. The final betrayal. She took my one secret, my one ugly little escape, and she handed it directly to the man who created the prison I was trying to escape from. She didn't just expose me. She sacrificed me to protect him. All those years of bedtime, stories, packed lunches, scraped knees, all of it meant nothing. I was the enemy now. I followed her. I don't even know what I was planning to do. Mark was standing up, his face pale and confused Chloe, shoving my phone into his hands. He looked from the phone to me, his expression unreadable. Not angry, just hollow. All the fight went out of me. But then Chloe turned to me again, her face righteous and furious. You're disgusting, she said, her voice dripping with poison. The anger came back hot and wild. It was pure hurt. Get out of my face, I slurred the words, thick with wine and rage. You're such an a-hole, you know that. What is wrong with you? She cried. F off, Chloe. Just F off and leave me alone, I pointed a shaking finger at her. You have no idea what you've just done. She flinched like I'd hit her. Mark finally spoke, his voice quiet and dead. Go to your room, Chloe. He didn't look at me. He just kept staring at the phone screen, at the proof of what I was. I turned and walked away. I went to the kitchen and poured another glass of wine. My hands shaking so badly, some of it sloshed onto the counter. I didn't care. I drank it down in 3 gulps and poured another. I could hear them talking in low voices, his deep and rumbling, hers high and hysterical. They were a team now. It was them against me. The next morning, my head felt like it was splitting in 2, but that was nothing compared to the gaping hole in my chest. The house was silent. Not the usual quiet, but a heavy, deliberate silence. I found Chloe in the kitchen making toast her back to me. She moved with a stiff, deliberate anger. I had to try. I had to make her understand. "Chloe," I said, my voice hoarse. She didn't turn around. "Can we please talk?" She kept buttering her toast. "There's nothing to talk about." "Yes, there is." I took a step closer. My heart was pounding. What I did was wrong, I know that. But I need you to understand why. I was begging. You know what betrayal feels like. You remember. You remember how you felt when your dad told us about the gambling? I was hoping she would see the connection, the parallel. I wasn't excusing what I did. I was trying to give it a reason, a source. I was trying to tell her that this sickness in our family didn't start with me. It started with him. She finally turned around, her eyes cold. "Don't you dare," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "Don't you dare compare what you did to what Dad did. He made a mistake. He was sick. You did this on purpose. To hurt him." "It wasn't about him," I cried, my voice cracking. "It had nothing to do with him, can't you see? It was about me. About feeling like I mattered for 5 seconds in a day." I reached out, wanting to hug her, to hold my little girl, and make her see me. "Please, honey." She flinched away from my hand so violently. It was like I'd burned her. She took a step back, holding her toast like a shield. Her eyes were hard. The verdict was in them. I was guilty. There was no appeal. That was the moment I knew I had lost her. Maybe forever. The coldness in her gaze was the final blow. It told me everything. I was alone. Condemned in my own house by my own child. The two people I had spent my life building a world for had now built a wall to keep me out. I just nodded. There was nothing left to say. I turned around without another word and went upstairs. They can have their story. The one where he's the redeemed hero and I'm the villain who tried to tear it all down. They can have their quiet, stable house. I'm done. I'm done trying to hold the walls together. There's nothing left inside worth protecting anyway.
Story 11.
I'm sure you've read my husband's story. I'm the wife, the villain, the one who cheated and destroyed our perfect life. He laid out all the facts, presented his evidence like a prosecutor, and got the verdict he wanted from thousands of strangers online. But his facts are just bones without the flesh. He told you times what times happened, but he never understood times why, asterisk. He can't. To him, our life was a project he managed perfectly, and I was just a component that suddenly malfunctioned. He would tell you we had it all, and on paper we did. We met in college, and I got pregnant at 22. It wasn't planned, but he was always a planner. So he made a new plan. We got married when I was 23. He got a great job. And we had our son. A few years later, our daughter. He bought a beautiful house in a good school district. He managed the finances. Everything was perfect. He built this perfect little world, and I was his perfect little wife, the final piece he slotted into place. But have you ever looked at a beautiful painting in a museum? It's perfect, but it's trapped in a frame. It can't move. It can't change. It can only be what it was made to be. For 7 years, that was me. I stopped being Sue. I was mom to my kids and wife to my husband. The woman I used to be, the one who loved loud music and stupid jokes and had opinions about politics, she just faded. I was a collection of duties. I made the lunches, scheduled the appointments, cleaned the house, and kept the kids happy. I was the chief operating officer of his perfect life. And he was a good manager. I'll give him that. But he wasn't a partner, not really. Not in the way I needed. He stopped times seeing times me. He'd come home, ask how my day was, but his eyes would already be on his phone or the TV. He'd nod while I talked, but he wasn't listening. He was just confirming that the system was running smoothly. He wrote about our intimacy, how he thought it was excellent. It wasn't. It became another task on his checklist. Tuesday and Saturday nights. It felt less like making love and more like a scheduled performance review to make sure that part of the marriage was still functional. I felt completely and utterly invisible. Ghost in my own home. Then Frank started at my work. He was my new manager. And from the first day he saw times me asterisk. Not the mom with baby food on her shirt, not the wife who needed to be reminded to pick up dry cleaning. He saw Sue. He asked for my opinion in meetings and actually listened to the answer. He'd laugh at a dumb joke I made. He remembered I liked a certain kind of coffee and would have one on my desk some mornings. It was small things, tiny things, but after years of being invisible, it felt like someone had turned a spotlight on me. This attention wasn't just nice. It was like air after being underwater for too long. The texting started innocently. Jokes about work, complaining about a deadline. It was a little spark in my otherwise gray day. It was a secret, but it was times, my times, secret. A little corner of my life that wasn't managed by my husband, that wasn't about the kids or the house. It was just for me. My husband started to notice something was off. He's a manager, remember? He notices when a system has a glitch. But his confrontations weren't about us. He never sat me down and said, "Sue, I feel like you're distant. Are you happy? Is something wrong?" No. It was an audit. He'd just stare at me across the dinner table with this cold, calculating look and ask, "Are you hiding something, or is there something you need to tell me?" He had no proof, no evidence. It was just a feeling he had, and he treated it like he was cross-examining a hostile witness. He wasn't worried about me. He was scanning for a defect. Each time I denied it, I felt a little more justified. He wasn't trying to connect with me. He was trying to catch me. His suspicion didn't make me want to come clean. It pushed me further into the one place where I felt understood. I knew hooking up with Frank was wrong. I'm not an idiot. I knew it was a line I should never cross. But my life at home felt so empty, and the connection with Frank felt so real. The idea of telling my husband the truth was impossible. How do you explain to the architect of a perfect building that you're suffocating inside of it? He wouldn't hear. I'm unhappy. He'd hear there's a problem, and he'd try to fix it. He'd suggest therapy, a vacation, a new hobby. He'd patch the crack in the wall, paint over it, and pretend it was never there. He wouldn't understand that the whole foundation was the problem. So I made the worst decision of my life. Frank was going to a conference in the city about an hour away, and he got a hotel room. He asked me to come. It felt reckless and insane, a fantasy I needed to make real just for a few hours. I needed to feel like a desired woman, not just a wife or a mother just once. I told my husband I had to work late a project for Frank that was on a tight deadline. The lie tasted like poison in my mouth. I love my kids more than anything in this world, and the thought of hurting them was unbearable. But in that moment, I wasn't thinking about destroying my family. I was just desperately trying to find a piece of myself I thought was gone forever. We met at the hotel. It was awkward at first, then exciting. We talked for hours. We ordered room service. For the first time in years, I felt like the main character in my own life, not a supporting role in someone else's. I felt alive. For a few hours, the crushing weight of the perfect life was gone. Then there was a knock on the door. It wasn't loud or angry, just a firm, solid rap, rap, rap. It cut through the air instantly, shattering the fantasy. Frank and I looked at each other, the same confused, then fearful expression on our faces. Room service. It couldn't be. My heart started pounding in my chest, a cold dread washing over me. It felt like the sound of a judge's gavel. Frank, being closer to the door, stood up to open it. I remember thinking times, please don't. Just ignore it. Asterisk, but he opened it, and my whole world ended. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't a tearful, angry confrontation. It was an execution. My husband was standing there. He wasn't crying. His face wasn't red with rage. It was cold, calm, and worst of all, triumphant. Like a general who had just won a war. Beside him stood another man in a cheap suit, holding a large manila envelope. My husband didn't even look at me at first. He looked right past Frank, his eyes scanning the room, taking in the rumpled bed, the room service tray, logging every detail for his report. Frank is it, he said, his voice flat. Frank just nodded, speechless. Sue, you should know Frank has a wife and kids. He also has at least 2 other women he's doing this with. You're not special. He said it so matter-of-factly, like he was reading a grocery list. Frank started to stammer to deny it, but my husband cut him off. Then he finally looked at me. There was no pain in his eyes. Just satisfaction. The man with him stepped forward and pushed the envelope into my hands. You've been served, he mumbled. I looked down at the papers. Divorce, custody, everything. My brain just short-circuited. This wasn't a heartbroken man lashing out. This was a plan. A cold, calculated, meticulously engineered trap. He had rented the room across the hall. He had hired a person to serve me. He had been spying on me, waiting for the perfect moment not to save our marriage, but to obliterate me in the most humiliating way possible. He hadn't come to fight for us. He came to win. "You're single now," he said to me, his lip curling into a small, cruel smile. "Have a nice life." And then he turned and walked away. The door clicked shut, leaving me and Frank in a silence that was louder than a bomb. A sound started building in my chest, a primal noise of pure agony, and it came out as a scream. "I'm sure he heard it." He wrote later that he took solace in it. That scream wasn't for the affair being discovered. It was the sound of my soul being ripped out. It was the sound of realizing the man I had built a life with, the father of my children, had just enjoyed destroying me. I don't remember leaving the hotel. The next few days are a blur of shame, and a silence so complete it was a physical weight. He had already moved his things out of our house. He blocked my number. When my parents called him, pleading with him to at least speak to me about the kids, he hung up on them. He enacted a strict no-contact policy. He wasn't just leaving me. He was erasing me. I was left alone in the perfect house he'd built, now a mausoleum surrounded by the wreckage he'd orchestrated. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I just replayed that moment at the door over and over. His triumphant face, the satisfaction in his eyes. It wasn't the affair that broke me. It was him. It was the realization that he didn't see me as his wife or the mother of his children. I was a faulty part in his perfect machine, and he was simply discarding me with cold efficiency. The affair was my mistake, my terrible, life-ruining mistake. But his reaction, his cruelty, was his choice. About a week later, my mom called me crying. "Sue, you can't look. Please promise me you won't look." She told me he was writing about it online, posting the whole story for strangers to read. I didn't listen. I had to see. And there it was. My worst, most shameful moment, written out like a heroic epic with him as the stoic hero and me as the cartoon villain. He detailed his suspicions, his investigation, the confrontation at the hotel. He twisted every detail to make himself look like a strategic genius, and me like a pathetic monster. He didn't mention the 7 years of loneliness. He didn't mention the audits or the invisibility. He just presented the facts. And the comments. Thousands of them. People cheering him on. Calling him a king. A legend. They celebrated his cruelty. They laughed at my humiliation. They posted memes. They turned the utter destruction of my life, the pain of my children's family being torn apart, into entertainment. My private hell had become a viral spectacle. That was the moment I broke. It wasn't just the affair or the divorce or even his coldness. It was seeing my complete annihilation framed as his victory. It was realizing he had not only trapped me and executed me, but he had mounted my head on a pike for the whole world to see and applaud. The abyss I was in suddenly felt bottomless. There was no way out. The shame was everywhere. I couldn't escape it. He had engineered it that way. My suicide attempt wasn't a cry for attention. I don't think I even wanted his attention anymore. It was a genuine belief that my life was over, that I had nothing left to offer my children but a legacy of shame. It was a desperate final attempt to make the pain stop. I wanted to escape the character he had written for me in his story. I woke up in a hospital, and in the quiet of that sterile room after the fog cleared, I realized something. He won. He got exactly what he wanted. He got to be the perfect victim, the perfect hero, and he got to burn my life to the ground to prove it. I made a terrible mistake with Frank, one I will regret for the rest of my life. I own that. I broke our vows and I hurt the one person I was supposed to protect. But my story isn't just about an affair. It's about what happens when a perfect life becomes a perfect cage. And the person who built it cares more about the cage than the person living inside it.
Story 12.
Everyone thinks my husband is a saint. I'm sure that's what he's telling people now. He's the good man, the stable provider, the one who took in a single mom and her 2 boys when we had nothing. And I was grateful, I really was. But living on gratitude alone is like trying to stay warm by a picture of a fire. It looks nice, but you're still freezing. When I married him, I didn't just move into a house. I moved into a life that was already perfectly preserved under glass. His first wife, the mother of his 2 daughters, was everywhere. Her pictures were on the mantel, her books were on the shelves, her favorite coffee mug was still in the cupboard. I felt like a ghost haunting someone else's home. His daughters, who were almost adults, were perfectly nice to me. They called me by my first name and treated me like a cool older sister they had to hang out with on holidays. They never once called me a stepmom. I was an addition, a new piece of furniture he'd brought in, but I never felt like family. I was just there. He's a kind man, I won't deny that. But his kindness feels like a form of control. It's quiet, it's steady, and it never ever gets loud. He wanted to adopt my sons. He presented it like this amazing gift, this final step in making us a real family. But all I could hear was him trying to erase their past. Erase their father. Erase the part of me that existed before I met him. My boys have a father. He wasn't perfect. Far from it, but he's a part of them. My husband wanting to stamp his own name over, that felt less like love and more like a hostile takeover. The worst part was how he handled my own father. My dad can be a lot. He's old school loud, and he never thought my husband was man enough for me. He'd make little comments at dinner, digs about my husband's job or his quiet nature. And my husband would just sit there and take it. He'd smile that calm, polite smile and change the subject. He called it being non-confrontational. I called it leaving me to fight my own battles. He wouldn't stand up for himself, which meant he would never stand up for me. I was the one stuck in the middle, defending my husband to my father, and then trying to explain my father to my husband. I felt completely alone, trapped in this beautiful, sterile house that was really a shrine to another woman. I was suffocating. Then in February, my ex came back. He just showed up. The world sees him as a deadbeat who disappeared, and maybe he was. But to me, he was the guy I fell in love with at 19, the other half of my kids. He wasn't safe or predictable. He was a hurricane, and after years of living in a climate-controlled box, I can't tell you how good it felt to feel the wind and the rain again. He didn't just come back with apologies. He came back with a mission. One afternoon, he met me at a coffee shop and slid a thick envelope across the table. Inside was $15, 0 inches cash. It was probably every penny he had in the world. It was a stupid, reckless, dramatic gesture, and it was the most romantic thing anyone had done for me in years. My husband manages our finances on a spreadsheet, planning for a retirement I couldn't even imagine. My ex showed up with a bag of cash because he felt guilty and wanted to fix something he broke. That messy, chaotic, desperate love was something my new perfect life had completely scrubbed clean. It wasn't a plan. The affair wasn't something I thought about and decided to do. It was more like a slow collapse. We started talking on the phone about the boys, about old times. We talked about who we used to be. With him, I wasn't my husband's second wife or a guest in a stranger's home. I was just me. The me I was before all this. The conversations turned into him stopping by, just for a coffee, just to talk. Then a hand on my arm. A look that lasted too long. I knew it was wrong, but it felt more real than anything else in my life. That Monday morning, my husband was at work and the kids were at school. The house was quiet. My ex came over. For the first time, standing in that big, silent living room, it didn't feel like I was trespassing. It felt like my space. He looked at me, and I didn't see a replacement or a project to be fixed. He just saw me. He stepped forward and kissed me, and it was like a dam breaking inside me. All the loneliness, all the frustration, all the feeling of being invisible just washed away. It was a stupid, terrible mistake, but it was my mistake. We ended up on the couch and I felt more alive and more myself than I had in years. It wasn't about betraying my husband. It was about finding a piece of me I thought I had lost forever. In that moment, with the morning sun streaming through the windows, I felt completely, utterly seen. We were still on the couch, tangled up in clothes and shame, and a strange kind of relief when I heard the sound. It wasn't the garage door opening or a car in the driveway. It was just the soft click of the front door. I never heard him come in. My ex scrambled to pull his shirt back on, but I just froze. My husband doesn't yell. He doesn't throw things. He just stood in the doorway of the living room holding his briefcase, his face as calm and empty as a frozen lake. He looked at my ex, not with anger, but with a kind of mild disinterest, like he was a bug on the wall. "You should leave," he said. His voice was perfectly level. My ex looked at me, his face pale, but he just grabbed his jacket and walked out without another word. My husband didn't even watch him go. His eyes were fixed on me. "Get dressed," he said, and went into the kitchen. There was no screaming match. There was no crying or begging. I thought maybe he was in shock. I followed him into the kitchen, my hands shaking as I buttoned my shirt, trying to string words together. An apology, an explanation, anything. But he was already one step ahead. He was always one step ahead. He turned from the counter, holding his phone. "I was suspicious," he said, as if he were discussing a dip in the stock market. "Your phone calls, your moods. So I took precautions." He tapped the screen and set the phone on the kitchen island angled toward me. And I saw it. I saw our living room filmed from a weird angle up by the ceiling. I saw my ex walk in. I saw us talk. I saw him kiss me. I saw everything that had happened on the couch, all of it playing out in grainy, silent video. A tiny camera hidden on top of the entertainment center. He had been watching me. The feeling of being a ghost in his house was wrong. I wasn't a ghost. I was a specimen under a microscope. I felt sick. It wasn't just the shame of being caught. It was the horror of being spied on. He wasn't a hurt husband. He was an intelligence officer who had just confirmed his target was a traitor. "Our prenup is very clear about infidelity," he said, putting the phone back in his pocket. "You get nothing." I just stared at him, my mind reeling. The betrayal of the affair felt small compared to the cold, calculated betrayal of that camera. He hadn't been loving me. He'd been monitoring me. Then he delivered the final killing blow. "I thought your father should know what kind of situation this is," he said calmly, "so he doesn't get any wrong ideas about who is at fault. I sent him a copy." The air left my lungs. I think I actually stumbled back against the counter. He didn't just tell my father. He times sent him the video asterisk. The one person on this earth who I thought would always be in my corner, my loud, protective, difficult dad. My husband had taken my lowest moment, the worst thing I had ever done, and mailed it to him like a piece of evidence. He knew my dad was my weakness and my strength, and he used my shame to break him, to finally win the silent war he'd been fighting with him. He didn't just want to divorce me. He wanted to leave me utterly, completely alone. The meeting a few days later wasn't a conversation. It was a sentencing hearing. We sat at the big dining room table he'd shared with his first wife. My husband sat at one end looking like a judge. I sat on one side. And my father sat next to me, looking older and smaller than I had ever seen him. He wouldn't even look at me. My husband placed a small digital recorder on the table and pressed the red button. "For the record," he began. He laid out the terms of my surrender. The prenup would be enforced. I would leave the house. He was filing for divorce immediately. Then came the part about my boys. He said with that same calm, reasonable voice that he wanted to do what was best for them. He would not contest me, having primary custody, of course. In fact, he would continue to pay for their private school and all their expenses as long as I agreed to the terms. He was positioning himself as the hero, the benevolent man stepping up to care for the children of the woman who destroyed their family. My father just sat there, broken. The loud, boisterous man who criticized my husband for being weak was completely silent. He had seen the video. He had been defeated. My husband didn't just win against me. He won against him too. I was a pawn they had both been playing with, and I had just been swept off the board. I left that house with 2 suitcases and my sons. I'm staying with a friend for now. Everyone will hear his side of the story. They'll see the stable, kind man whose wife cheated on him in his own home. They'll see the saint who is still taking care of her kids. They won't see the tiny camera on the TV stand. They won't see the man who watched his wife like a prisoner, waiting for her to break. They won't see the coldness in his eyes when he used my shame like a weapon. He wasn't a victim in this. He was my keeper. And this whole thing, the affair, the discovery, the divorce, it wasn't a tragedy for him. It was just his way of making sure that even after I was finally out of his house, he still had me locked in a cage.